3 years of planning, one night to destroy him. Aurora Bianchi stood in a ballroom filled with New York's most dangerous crime families, her heart pounding as she prepared to humiliate Adrian Valerio, the Mafia boss who murdered her brother. She'd rehearsed this moment 1,000 times, the public confrontation, the scandal, watching his empire crumble before the city's underworld elite. But when their eyes locked across the champagne-lit room, something shifted. He didn't look like a monster. He looked like a man with secrets of his own, and Aurora was about to ignite a war that would consume them both. If you're ready for a story of revenge, lies, and dangerous love, stay with me until the end. Hit that like button and drop a comment with your city so I can see how far this story travels. Now, let's begin. The Venetian hotel ballroom glittered like a fever dream, all crystal chandeliers and polished marble, soft jazz threading through conversations conducted in careful whispers. Aurora Bianchi stood near the bar, her emerald dress clinging to her frame like armor, and surveyed the room with the calculating precision of a general preparing for battle. She'd spent 3 years getting to this moment, 3 years learning the rhythms of New York's underworld, memorizing names and faces, understanding the delicate ecosystem of power that governed the 5 families. 3 years building a new identity, cultivating connections, earning invitations to events like this, gatherings where legitimate business blurred seamlessly into criminal enterprise, where handshakes sealed deals worth millions and feuds that would end in blood. 3 years since they'd found her brother Marco's body in the East River. Aurora's fingers tightened around her champagne flute. The glass was baccarat crystal, probably worth more than most people earned in a month. Everything in this room was expensive, excessive, designed to remind you of the wealth and power concentrated in this single space. She'd grown up in a modest Brooklyn apartment where her mother worked double shifts and Marco had dreams of becoming a teacher. This world had been as foreign to them as the surface of Mars, until Marco got involved with the wrong people, until he'd tried to do the right thing and paid for it with his life. "You're staring," a voice murmured beside her. Aurora glanced at the woman who'd appeared at her elbow, Valentina Corso, daughter of one of the smaller families, and the closest thing Aurora had to an ally in this viper's nest. Valentina had her own reasons for hating the established order, her own scores to settle. That made her useful, if not exactly trustworthy. "Just admiring the view," Aurora replied smoothly. Valentina's red lips curved into a knowing smile. "Admiring or hunting? Can't it be both?" Across the room, near the main entrance, a subtle shift in the crowd's energy announced an important arrival. Conversations didn't stop exactly, but they modulated, became more careful. Heads turned with the studied casualness of people who wanted to observe without appearing to do so. Aurora knew who it was before she saw him. She'd been tracking Adrian Valerio's schedule for months, knew his patterns, his preferences, his weaknesses. She knew he'd arrive exactly 43 minutes after the event's official start time, late enough to make an entrance, early enough to avoid genuine disrespect to the host. She knew he'd wear a Tom Ford suit in charcoal gray or midnight blue, that he'd order Macallan 25 if the bar stocked it, Johnny Walker Blue if they didn't. She knew he had a small scar above his left eyebrow from a childhood fight, that he spoke 4 languages fluently, that he'd never been photographed smiling. She knew everything about him except the one thing that mattered: why he'd ordered her brother's death. Adrian Valerio moved through the crowd with the unconscious confidence of a man who'd never questioned his right to occupy any space he entered. He was tall, 6'2", Aurora's research had told her, with the dark hair swept back from a face that was more interesting than handsome. Strong jaw, sharp cheekbones, eyes so dark they looked black from a distance. He wore power the way other men wore cologne, an invisible but unmistakable presence that announced itself before he spoke a word. He was 34 years old. He controlled territory from the Bronx to Staten Island. He'd inherited his position from his uncle at 26 and consolidated power through a combination of strategic brilliance and ruthless efficiency. People whispered that he was the smartest of the current generation of bosses, that he saw 3 moves ahead when others were still planning their first. Aurora had spent 3 years learning how to destroy him. "You're really going through with this," Valentina said quietly. It wasn't a question. Aurora took a sip of champagne, let the bubbles burn cold down her throat. Did you think I wouldn't? I thought you might choose survival over satisfaction. Maybe I'm greedy. Maybe I want both. Valentina studied her for a long moment, then shrugged. Your funeral. Literally, probably. She drifted away into the crowd, smart enough to establish distance before the explosion. Aurora set down her champagne flute and smoothed her hands over her dress. Her heart was beating fast now, adrenaline singing through her veins. She'd rehearsed this moment so many times it had taken on a dreamlike quality, and now that it was finally here, she almost couldn't believe it was real. 3 years. Everything came down to the next 5 minutes. She moved through the crowd with deliberate grace, angling her path to intercept Adrian as he made his way from the entrance. People parted for him automatically, a ripple effect of deference and calculation. He was deep in conversation with an older man Aurora recognized as Vincent Calabrese, head of one of the New Jersey operations. Their heads were bent close together, discussing something that made Vincent's expression tighten with concern. Aurora timed her approach perfectly. She stumbled, not dramatically, just enough, and collided directly with Adrian Valerio's shoulder, her champagne sloshing dangerously in its glass. The conversation stopped. Adrian turned, and for the first time, Aurora found herself looking directly into his eyes. They were darker than she'd expected. Not warm, exactly, but not the cold void she'd imagined either. Intelligent, assessing. In the space of a heartbeat, she felt measured, categorized, and filed away in whatever mental database he maintained. "I'm so sorry," she said, injecting just the right note of embarrassed apology into her voice. "I wasn't watching where I was going." Adrian's expression didn't change. "Clearly. Here, let me—" She reached out as if to brush off his jacket, and he caught her wrist. His grip was firm, but not painful, his fingers warm against her skin. "That won't be necessary," he said evenly. This was the moment. Aurora met his gaze and let her expression shift from apologetic to something colder, sharper. Of course not. Adrian Valerio doesn't need help from anyone, does he? Certainly not from the sister of the men he kills. The temperature in their immediate vicinity dropped 20 degrees. Vincent Calabrese's eyes widened. Around them, conversations faltered and stopped as people realized something significant was happening. Adrian's grip on her wrist tightened fractionally. "Excuse me?" Aurora raised her voice just enough to ensure the nearest clusters of people could hear clearly. "I said you don't need help. You're very efficient at handling things yourself, eliminating problems, making people disappear. Isn't that right, Mr. Valerio?" The ballroom had gone quiet. Not completely. The jazz trio still played near the far windows, and there were still pockets of conversation in distant corners. But in their immediate area, silence spread like spilled wine. Adrian released her wrist. His face remained impassive, but something shifted behind his eyes. "I think there's been some kind of misunderstanding." "No misunderstanding." Aurora smiled, bright and cold and terrible. "I understand perfectly. You're a murderer. You have blood on your hands. My brother's blood. And everyone in this room knows it, but they're all too afraid or too corrupt to say it out loud." Someone gasped. Someone else swore quietly. Vincent Calabrese had gone pale and was edging away, clearly wanting no part of whatever was about to happen. Aurora felt power surge through her. This was it. The moment she'd dreamed about. Every eye in the room was on them now, watching the unknown woman in the emerald dress confronting one of the most dangerous men in New York. By tomorrow, this would be whispered about in every restaurant and social club and back room in the 5 boroughs. Adrian Valerio, publicly accused of murder at the Bellavia charity gala. Adrian Valerio humiliated in front of his peers. Adrian Valerio looking at her like he could see straight through to her bones. "You have no idea," he said quietly, his voice carrying, despite its low volume, "what you've just done." "I know exactly what I've done." "No." He stepped closer, and Aurora had to fight the instinct to step back. "You don't. But you're about to learn." He moved suddenly, his hand closing around her upper arm with that same firm, not painful grip. Before Aurora could react, he was steering her through the crowd, which parted before them like water before a ship's prow. She could have fought, could have made a scene, but she'd made her point. Let him have his private tantrum. Let him threaten her in some back room while the whole party buzzed with scandal. She'd won. Adrian guided her through a side door, down a hallway lined with expensive artwork, and out onto a private terrace that overlooked the Manhattan skyline. The sounds of the party muted behind them. The night air was cool against Aurora's heated skin. The moment the door closed behind them, Adrian released her and spun to face her. The careful control he'd maintained in the ballroom had cracked, revealing something harder underneath. "Who are you?" he demanded. "I told you, Marco Bianchi's sister." Something flickered across his face. Recognition, maybe, or calculation. "Marco Bianchi. You remember him then? I wasn't sure if you kept track of all the people you murdered." "I didn't murder anyone," Adrian said flatly. Aurora laughed, sharp and bitter. "Of course you didn't. Men like you never do. You just give orders and let other people dirty their hands." "You don't know what you're talking about. I know my brother is dead. I know he was found in the East River with 3 bullets in his chest. I know he'd been working for you, and I know he disappeared the same week he told me he'd discovered something that could bring down your entire operation." Aurora's voice was shaking now, 3 years of controlled fury finally breaking free. "I know you had him killed to protect yourself, and I know you've gotten away with it because everyone's too fucking scared to stand up to you." Adrian stared at her, and for a long moment, the only sound was the distant traffic and the muffled music from the party inside. "Marco Bianchi," he said slowly, "was not murdered on my orders." Liar. Marco Bianchi was a traitor. Aurora's hand flew before she could think, slapping him hard across the face. The crack of palm against skin echoed across the terrace. Adrian's head snapped to the side. When he turned back, there was a red mark blooming on his cheek, but his expression had gone completely cold. "Careful," he said softly. "You get one of those, just one." Aurora's chest was heaving, her hand stinging. "My brother was not a traitor. He was a good man who made the mistake of thinking he could trust you." "Your brother," Adrian said, biting off each word, "was feeding information to the FBI. He was wearing a wire. He was building a case that would have sent 24 people to prison, including several who had nothing to do with the parts of my business he objected to. He was prepared to destroy families, to leave children without fathers, to start a war that would have turned the streets into a bloodbath." "That's not true." "It's completely true. I have the recordings. I have the transcripts. Marco Bianchi was a federal informant, and when my people discovered it, they voted to eliminate him." "You're lying," Aurora said, but her voice had lost its certainty. Adrian pulled out his phone, tapped the screen a few times, then held it out to her. "Audio file, dated 3 years and 4 months ago. That's your brother's voice. The other voice belongs to FBI Special Agent Richard Corrigan. Listen." Aurora stared at the phone like it was a snake. "Listen," Adrian commanded. Against her better judgment, Aurora took the phone. Her hand trembled as she pressed play. Static, then voices. Male voices. One of them familiar in a way that made her chest ache. "Can't keep doing this. They're getting suspicious. You're doing fine, Marco. Just a little longer. You said that 3 months ago. I want out. We've been through this. You're in too deep. If you stop cooperating now, I know what they'll do. But I can't. Some of these guys, they have families, kids. I thought we were going after murderers and drug dealers, not union guys trying to make a living. Marco, everyone you're helping us investigate has broken the law. Multiple laws. They've made their choices. And I made mine. I want protection. I want witness protection for me and my family. And then I'm done. We can discuss that after." Aurora stopped the recording. Her hand was shaking so badly she almost dropped the phone. "This doesn't prove anything. It proves your brother was exactly what I said he was. It proves he was trying to do the right thing." "The right thing," Adrian said, his voice hard, "would have been not getting involved in the first place. The right thing would have been staying out of a world he didn't understand. But he took a job running numbers for the Castellano crew, and when the FBI squeezed him, he rolled over like a trained dog." "Stop it," Aurora whispered. "He was going to testify. Did you know that? He'd already given the FBI enough for preliminary indictments. Another month and they would have moved forward with arrests. Dozens of arrests. People who trusted him, who thought he was one of them, would have gone to prison because your brother decided his conscience mattered more than his loyalty. Loyalty to criminals? Loyalty to people. Adrian cut her off. To the guys who worked with him, who covered for him when he screwed up, who invited him to their kids' birthday parties. He betrayed all of them. And yes, when my people found out, they voted to eliminate the threat. Aurora's mind was reeling. This couldn't be true. Marco wouldn't have. He couldn't have. But even as she tried to reject it, pieces were clicking into place. Marco's increasing anxiety in the months before he died, the way he'd avoided her questions about work, the strange phone calls he'd taken at odd hours, the time she'd caught him crying in his car and he'd claimed it was just stress. "No," she said. "No, you're lying. You're just trying to—" "I didn't give the order," Adrian said, and something in his voice made Aurora look up. The vote was unanimous among the senior crew. I was overruled. I argued against it. Aurora's breath caught. "What?" "I said we should handle it differently. Your brother wasn't a real criminal. He was a civilian who got scared and made a bad choice. I wanted to expose him to the FBI, let them know we'd discovered the wire, and then offer him a deal. If he disappeared, if he took his family and left New York and never looked back, we'd let him go." "Why would you—" "Because unnecessary killing is bad for business. Because starting a war with the FBI over one informant is stupid. Because I actually believed what you clearly don't, that your brother was fundamentally a decent person who got in over his head." Adrian's jaw tightened. "But I was 26 years old, I'd been running things for less than 3 months, and the senior crew didn't trust my judgment. They voted 7-1 to eliminate him. I was the one vote against." Aurora felt like the ground had disappeared beneath her feet. "I don't believe you. I don't care what you believe." Adrian gestured toward the ballroom. "What you did in there was phenomenally stupid. You've made yourself a target. Every person in that room now knows you're connected to Marco Bianchi, which means they know you're either ignorant or reckless, and both are dangerous in this world. I'm not afraid of you. You should be. Not because I want to hurt you, but because there are people who will. People who don't appreciate public scenes, who view what you did as a sign of disrespect to the entire organization." Adrian moved closer, his dark eyes intense. "Do you understand what I'm telling you? You just painted a target on your back in front of every made man in New York." Aurora lifted her chin. "Then I guess I better make it count." "This isn't a joke." "I'm not joking." The words burst out of her. "My brother is dead. Dead. And whether you gave the order or not, it happened because of your world, your rules, your fucking code. So forgive me if I don't care about the consequences." They stared at each other, breathing hard, the space between them crackling with tension. "You want revenge," Adrian said finally. It wasn't a question. "I want justice. In this world, there's no difference." He studied her for a long moment. "What's your name? Your real name?" "Aurora Bianchi." "How did you get an invitation to this event, Aurora Bianchi?" "I have friends." "You have people who used you to cause problems for me," Adrian corrected. "Tell me who helped you, and maybe I can protect you from the fallout." Aurora laughed bitterly. "I don't need your protection. Everyone needs protection. That's how this world works." Adrian pulled out his phone again, tapped something, then returned it to his pocket. "I'm having you escorted home. My driver will take you wherever you want to go, and then you're going to disappear. Leave New York. Go back to wherever you came from. Forget about revenge. Forget about your brother, and live your life." "I'm not going anywhere." "You don't have a choice." "There's always a choice." Aurora stepped closer to him, close enough to see the gold flecks in his dark eyes. "You can have me escorted out. You can threaten me, intimidate me, try to make me run. But I'm not running. I spent 3 years preparing for this, and I'm not done." 3 years, Adrian repeated, "planning to publicly humiliate me at a charity gala. Congratulations, you succeeded. Now what? You think that changes anything? You think Marco is any less dead?" The words hit like a physical blow. Aurora's eyes burned, but she refused to let herself cry. "Not here. Not in front of him." "I think," she said quietly, "that you're going to remember my name. I think you're going to lie awake at night wondering what I'm going to do next. I think I've made myself a problem you can't ignore." "You've made yourself a corpse," Adrian said flatly. "You just don't know it yet." The terrace door opened, and a man Aurora recognized as one of Adrian's security team stepped out. "Car's ready, boss." Adrian gestured toward Aurora without looking away from her. Take Ms. Bianchi wherever she wants to go. Make sure she arrives safely. I can get myself home. I'm sure you can, but you're going to accept the ride anyway, because if something happens to you between here and there, people will assume I ordered it, and I don't need that complication. Adrian finally broke eye contact, turning toward the door. This is goodbye, Aurora Bianchi. For your sake, I hope I never see you again. He walked away, leaving Aurora alone on the terrace with the security guard and the glittering Manhattan skyline. She should have felt triumphant. She'd done what she set out to do, confronted Adrian Valerio publicly, humiliated him, made him notice her, but instead she felt hollow. Because if what he'd said was true, if Marco had really been an informant, if Adrian had actually argued against killing him, then who was she really angry at? The security guard cleared his throat. Ma'am, the car? Aurora nodded numbly and followed him back through the ballroom. People stared as she passed, their expressions ranging from shock to pity to poorly concealed glee. She'd given them a show, all right. By tomorrow, her name would be known throughout the underworld. Whether that made her brave or suicidal remained to be seen. The drive back to her apartment in Brooklyn passed in a blur. The security guard, whose name she didn't ask and he didn't offer, remained silent, occasionally checking the rear-view mirror with the practiced efficiency of someone used to potential threats. When they arrived at her building, he walked her to the door and waited until she was safely inside before returning to the car. Aurora climbed the 3 flights to her apartment, her legs shaking with delayed reaction. Inside, she locked the door, set the chain, and finally allowed herself to collapse onto her couch. Her hands were trembling. She pressed them against her face and tried to slow her breathing, tried to process everything that had happened. Marco, an informant. Marco, wearing a wire. Marco, betraying people who'd trusted him. It didn't fit with the brother she'd known. Marco, who'd helped her with homework, who'd worked 2 jobs to help pay for their mother's medical bills, who'd cried when their childhood dog died. That Marco wouldn't have become a criminal informant. Would he? Aurora stood and walked to her bedroom, to the small desk where she kept her research. 3 years of carefully assembled information, newspaper clippings, photographs, organizational charts, financial records obtained through means she preferred not to examine too closely. Everything she knew about Adrian Valerio and the Valerio crime family. She opened her laptop and pulled up the encrypted files where she kept her most sensitive information. Then she started searching. FBI investigations into organized crime 3 years ago. Federal informants. Agent Richard Corrigan, the name from the recording. It took her 2 hours, but she found it. Buried in a news archive, a small article about a federal investigation that had been quietly shelved. No names mentioned, but the timeline matched. The investigation had been building towards something significant, then suddenly evaporated. Lack of evidence, the article claimed. Witness credibility issues. Witness credibility issues, because the witness had turned up dead in the East River. Aurora's phone buzzed. A text from an unknown number. You made quite an impression tonight. People are talking. Be careful what you wish for. V. Valentina. Checking in, probably equal parts concerned and entertained. Aurora didn't respond. She was too busy following another thread, this one about Marco's last few weeks. She'd interviewed his friends, his co-workers, anyone who'd known him. Most had been dead ends, but one woman, Sarah Chen, who'd worked in the same office, had mentioned something strange. Marco had been meeting with someone regularly in the weeks before his death, someone he wouldn't talk about, who made him nervous. At the time, Aurora had assumed it was his Mafia contacts. Now she wondered if it had been his FBI handler. Her phone rang. Unknown number again, but different from Valentina's text. Aurora hesitated, then answered. Hello? Ms. Bianchi. Adrian Valerio's voice was unmistakable. I hope you made it home safely. What do you want? To give you some advice. The people who helped you tonight, who encouraged you to make that scene, they're not your friends. They used you to embarrass me, to create chaos, to test how I'd respond to a public challenge. I don't need... Valentina Corso, Adrian continued, is the daughter of a man who wants my territory. She's smart, ambitious, and absolutely ruthless. Whatever she told you, whatever she promised you, It was a lie designed to serve her father's interests. Aurora's stomach tightened. How do you know I was working with Valentina? Because I know everything that happens in my city. Because I've been watching her try to recruit assets for the past 6 months. Because you're exactly the kind of person she'd target. Someone with a grudge. Someone willing to take risks. Someone who doesn't understand the full picture. And you're calling to what? Warn me? Save me? After you threatened me on that terrace? I'm calling because whether I like it or not, your brother's death is connected to me, and that creates a responsibility. I couldn't save Marco. Maybe I can save you. Aurora laughed bitterly. I don't want to be saved. Then you're going to die, Adrian said bluntly, and it will be ugly and painful and meaningless. Is that really what you want? Is that what Marco would want? The mention of her brother's name from Adrian's lips made something inside Aurora twist painfully. Don't talk about him like you knew him. I didn't know him, but I know what it's like to lose someone. I know what it's like to be angry and want someone to blame. There was something in Adrian's voice now, something almost gentle. I know what it's like to discover that the story you've been telling yourself isn't the whole truth. What are you talking about? My mentor. The man who raised me in this life, who taught me everything I know. His name was Antonio Russo. 3 years ago, he was murdered. Aurora went very still. By who? I don't know. The official story is that it was a rival family, retaliation for some business dispute. But Antonio was careful. He didn't make the kinds of enemies who'd risk open war. Adrian paused. The timing has always bothered me. He died 2 weeks after your brother, 2 weeks after a vote I lost and a decision I argued against. You think they're connected? I think there are too many unanswered questions. I think the people who pushed hardest for Marco's death were also the ones who benefited most from Antonio's. Who? Aurora demanded. Give me names. If I had proof, they'd already be dead. All I have are suspicions and coincidences. Not enough to act on. Not yet. Aurora's mind was racing. Why are you telling me this? Because you want the truth about your brother's death. So do I. Because maybe if we stop fighting each other, we can find it. It was insane. Trusting Adrian Valerio was possibly the stupidest thing Aurora could do. He could be lying, manipulating her, setting her up for something worse than a simple execution. But if he was telling the truth... What do you want from me? She asked. Meet me tomorrow. Neutral location, public place. We'll talk about what we both know, what we both want. Maybe we can help each other. Or maybe you'll kill me. If I wanted you dead, you'd already be dead, Adrian said matter-of-factly. Tomorrow, noon, the Bethesda Fountain in Central Park. Come alone. Don't tell anyone, especially not Valentina Corso. He hung up before Aurora could respond. She sat in the darkness of her apartment, her brother's research spread around her, and wondered if she'd just been offered the truth or invited to her own execution. Either way, she was going to find out. Aurora didn't sleep that night. She sat at her desk until dawn, cross-referencing everything she'd collected about Marco's death with what Adrian had told her. Antonio Russo's name kept appearing in her research. She'd seen it before but dismissed it as irrelevant, just another player in Adrian's organization. Now she pulled every mention, every connection, building a timeline that made her stomach turn. Antonio Russo had died exactly 13 days after Marco. Single gunshot to the head, execution style, in his own home. The killer had never been found. Adrian had been out of the country when it happened, establishing an alibi that seemed almost too convenient until Aurora realized what it really meant. Someone had waited until Adrian was gone to make their move. By the time sunlight crept through her apartment windows, Aurora had compiled a list of 7 men who'd been present at both the vote to kill Marco and the investigation into Antonio's murder. 7 men who'd had opportunity and potentially motive. 7 men whose names she'd never heard Adrian speak with anything resembling trust. At 11:30, she dressed in jeans and a leather jacket, pulled her hair into a ponytail, and took 3 different subway lines to Central Park, watching for anyone who might be following her. Valentina had texted twice asking about her plans for the day. Aurora had ignored both messages. The Bethesda Fountain was crowded with tourists and locals enjoying the mild autumn weather. Aurora spotted Adrian immediately. He stood apart from the crowd, dressed casually in dark jeans and a black Henley that made him look younger, less dangerous than he had in his tailored suit. Almost normal, if you didn't notice the way he positioned himself with clear sightlines in all directions, or the subtle bulge under his jacket that suggested he was armed. Two men lingered nearby, trying and failing to look like random park visitors. Adrian's security, Aurora assumed. She walked up to him, her heart pounding despite her attempts to project confidence. "I'm here." "You came alone?" Adrian asked, his eyes scanning the crowd behind her. "Did you expect me to bring an army?" "I expected you to be smart. Smart would have been bringing backup." He gestured toward a bench near the fountain. "Sit. We need to talk, and I'd rather not do it standing where everyone can photograph us together." Aurora sat, leaving space between them. Adrian settled beside her, close enough that she could smell his cologne. Something expensive and subtle, cedar and smoke. Close enough that she was hyper-aware of his presence, the controlled power in his stillness. "I did research last night," she said. "Antonio Russo, your mentor. And? And you were right. The timing is suspicious." Aurora pulled out her phone, showed him the timeline she'd created. 13 days. Marco dies, and less than 2 weeks later, the man who argued against killing him is murdered. That's not coincidence. Adrian studied her phone screen, his expression unreadable. "No, it's not." "So who wanted both of them dead?" "That's the question I've been asking for 3 years. Adrian leaned back against the bench, his gaze distant. "Antonio taught me everything. How to negotiate, how to read people, how to build loyalty instead of ruling through fear. He believed the old ways were dying, that we needed to evolve or be destroyed by our own obsolescence." Sounds like he made enemies. He made enemies by being right, by threatening the comfortable order that let certain people maintain power without having to adapt or think. Adrian's jaw tightened. There were 7 men at that vote, 7 men who pushed for Marco's execution over my objections. Antonio supported me. He said killing an informant would bring federal heat we didn't need, that there were smarter ways to handle it. But they voted him down. They voted us both down. And then, 2 weeks later, Antonio was dead and I was alone at the top, surrounded by people I couldn't trust. Adrian turned to look at her directly. "Do you understand what I'm telling you? Your brother's death and my mentor's murder are connected. Someone orchestrated both, and they've been untouchable ever since." Aurora's hands curled into fists on her lap. "Give me the names, the 7 men who voted to kill Marco." "So you can do what? Storm into their houses with a gun, get yourself killed?" "So I can find out the truth." "The truth," Adrian said quietly, "is dangerous. It's the kind of thing that gets people disappeared. If we're going to do this, we do it carefully, methodically. We gather evidence, we build a case, and we don't move until we're absolutely certain." "We?" Aurora raised an eyebrow. "I don't remember agreeing to partner with you. You agreed the moment you showed up here instead of running. You want justice for Marco. I want justice for Antonio. Our goals align, which makes us temporary allies whether you like it or not." Aurora wanted to argue, to reject the idea of working with the man whose world had killed her brother. But Adrian was right. Alone, she was just an angry woman with a death wish. With him, she had access, information, protection. "What's your plan?" she asked. Antonio kept detailed records, financial transactions, meeting notes, insurance policies in case someone ever moved against him. He was paranoid, but he was smart about it. Everything was encrypted, backed up in multiple locations. Adrian pulled out a small flash drive. "This contains the locations of his safe houses. If the evidence exists, it's in one of them. And you haven't checked before now because the moment I start searching Antonio's properties, I tip off whoever killed him. They'll know I'm investigating, and they'll move to eliminate the evidence or eliminate me. Possibly both." Adrian held out the flash drive. "But if someone unconnected to me starts asking questions, looking into old properties, that's different. That's just a civilian poking around where they shouldn't be." Aurora took the drive, weighing it in her palm. "You want me to be your stalking horse. Draw out the threat while you watch from a safe distance. I want you to help me find the truth. Yes, there's risk, but you were willing to risk your life humiliating me at a gala full of criminals, so I assume you're not opposed to danger in general." There's a difference between calculated risk and suicide mission, which is why you won't be alone. Adrian nodded toward one of his security men. Michael will go with you. He was Antonio's personal bodyguard before he died. He's loyal, capable, and he wants answers as much as we do. Aurora studied the man Adrian had indicated, tall, broad-shouldered, with graying hair and the watchful eyes of someone who'd seen too much violence. And I'm supposed to just trust him? Trust you? No, Adrian said bluntly. You're supposed to verify everything I tell you, watch your back, and remember that we're using each other. I don't expect trust. I expect mutual self-interest. It was honest, at least. Aurora appreciated that more than false promises of friendship or protection. If I do this, she said slowly, I want something in return. Besides finding out who really killed your brother, I want the names, all 7 men who voted for Marco's death. And when this is over, when we have the evidence, I want them held accountable. Adrian's expression darkened. Accountable how? However justice works in your world. You said there were consequences for unnecessary killing, for starting wars over stupid decisions. Make them face those consequences. And if I'm the one who has to deliver that justice, if I'm the one who has to order executions, Aurora met his gaze steadily. Then I want to be there when it happens. I want to look them in the eyes and know they understand why they're dying. Something flickered in Adrian's expression, surprise maybe, or a dark kind of respect. You're more ruthless than you look. 3 years, Aurora said softly. 3 years of grief and rage and planning. You think I'm going to walk away now without seeing this through to the end? Adrian studied her for a long moment, then nodded. All right, you help me find the evidence, and I'll make sure everyone responsible answers for it. Deal? He held out his hand. Aurora stared at it, thinking about her brother, about Antonio Russo, about 3 years of believing she knew who the enemy was, only to discover the truth was far more complicated. She shook his hand. His grip was firm, warm, anchoring. Deal, she said. Over the next week, Aurora and Michael visited 3 of Antonio's properties. The first was a storage unit in Queens filled with furniture and boxes of old tax records, but nothing useful. The second was an apartment in the Bronx that had been rented under a shell company. They found financial ledgers dating back 15 years, but nothing related to Marco's death or the vote that preceded it. The third location was a cabin in the Catskills, 2 hours north of the city. Antonio bought this place 20 years ago, Michael explained as they drove through winding mountain roads, autumn leaves brilliant against the gray sky. Officially, it's owned by a Delaware LLC, but he paid cash and handled all the utilities through third parties. Nobody knows about it except the people he trusted most. Did Adrian know about it? Not until after Antonio died. The location was in a sealed letter delivered to Adrian with instructions not to open it unless something happened. Michael's hands tightened on the steering wheel. Antonio knew someone was going to move against him. He just didn't know who or when. The cabin sat at the end of a dirt road surrounded by dense forest. It looked abandoned, windows dark, leaves piled against the door, no tire tracks in the overgrown driveway. Stay behind me, Michael said as they approached. He had his gun drawn, moving with the practiced efficiency of someone who'd cleared rooms before. But the cabin was empty. Dusty furniture, a cold fireplace, kitchen cabinets stocked with canned goods that had expired years ago. It looked like a normal vacation property, nothing more. There has to be something, Aurora insisted, searching through drawers and closets. Why would Antonio leave Adrian this location if there was nothing here? Maybe someone already cleaned it out. Or maybe it's hidden. Aurora thought about what Adrian had told her. Antonio was paranoid but smart. He wouldn't leave evidence sitting out in the open. She searched methodically, checking for loose floorboards, false panels, anything that suggested a hiding place. Michael joined her, both of them working in focused silence. It was Michael who found it, a section of the stone fireplace that sounded hollow when tapped. Together they pried at the stones until one came loose, revealing a metal lockbox wedged into the cavity behind it. Aurora's hand shook as she lifted it out. The box was heavy, secure with a combination lock. Antonio's birthday, Michael said. Try that. The lock clicked open. Inside were 3 items: a leather journal, a stack of photographs, and a small digital recorder. Aurora opened the journal first. Antonio's handwriting, dense and meticulous, filled page after page. Dates, names, meetings, financial transactions, a complete record of the family's operations going back years. She flipped to the entries from 3 years ago, found the date of the vote about Marco. Vote called to address the Bianchi situation. I argued for exile, Adrian supported, outvoted 2-7. The dissenting votes: Marco Castellano, Vincent Calabrese, Tony Ricci, Paul De Luca, Joseph Marino, Frank Battaglia, and Dominic Russo. Aurora's breath caught. Russo, as in Antonio's nephew, Michael said grimly. Dominic Russo. He's been running the New Jersey operations since Antonio died. His own uncle argued against the execution, and Dominic voted for it anyway? Family loyalty doesn't mean what it used to. Michael picked up the photographs, spread them across the dusty coffee table. They showed meetings, exchanges of money, secret conversations. In several, Aurora recognized Dominic Russo, a man in his 40s with sharp features and expensive suits. In others, she saw the men whose names had appeared in Antonio's journal. But it was the last photograph that made her stomach drop. Dominic Russo and Valentina Corso, sitting together in what looked like a restaurant, their heads bent close in intimate conversation. The timestamp showed it was from 2 months ago. "Oh, God," Aurora whispered. "Valentina. You know her?" "She's the one who helped me get into the gala, who encouraged me to confront Adrian publicly." Aurora's mind was racing. Adrian said she was using me, but I didn't understand how. She wanted me to cause chaos, to embarrass Adrian in front of everyone. "To make him look weak," Michael said slowly. "To undermine his authority. If the other families think he can't control his own territory, can't even protect himself from public humiliation, they start questioning his leadership, looking for alternatives." Aurora picked up the digital recorder with trembling hands. "What's on this?" Michael took it from her, pressed play. Antonio's voice, older than Aurora had expected, rough with age or illness. "If you're hearing this, something has happened to me. Adrian, if this is you, I need you to understand something. Dominic has been working against us. He's been meeting with the Corso family, planning to merge operations, cut you out entirely. He pushed for the Bianchi execution because he knew it would bring federal attention, destabilize your position. He voted against my counsel because he wanted me out of the way. I don't have enough proof yet to move against him, but I'm close. Watch Dominic. Trust no one in the New Jersey crew. And Adrian, be careful. He's your blood, but blood doesn't mean what it used to." The recording ended. Silence filled the cabin. "Dominic Russo," Aurora said. "He orchestrated all of it. Marco's death, Antonio's murder, everything. And he's been protected by family ties. Adrian couldn't move against his own cousin without proof, without risking a civil war." Michael was already texting someone, presumably Adrian. "We need to get this evidence back to the city, now." They packed everything carefully, locked the cabin behind them, and headed back to the car. Aurora's mind was churning. Dominic Russo had manipulated everyone. The vote to kill Marco, Antonio's investigation, even Aurora's own confrontation with Adrian at the gala. He'd orchestrated chaos and then positioned himself to benefit from the fallout. And Valentina had been his partner the entire time. Aurora pulled out her phone, scrolled to Valentina's number. Before she could second-guess herself, she typed a message. "We need to talk. Found something about my brother's case. Can you meet?" The response came within seconds. "Of course. Where?" Aurora glanced at Michael. "I need to see her, confront her." "Bad idea. If she's working with Dominic, she's dangerous. Which is why you're going to be there watching my back. But I need to know why. Why she helped me, what she promised Dominic, what the endgame was." Aurora's voice was hard. "She used my grief. She used Marco's death as a weapon. I want to hear her justify that to my face." Michael considered, then nodded. "Set the meeting. But we do it on our terms, somewhere we control." Aurora arranged to meet Valentina at a coffee shop in the village. A place with big windows and multiple exits, public enough to discourage violence, but private enough for honest conversation. Michael positioned himself at a corner table with clear sightlines while Aurora sat near the window, waiting. Valentina arrived exactly on time, elegant in a cream-colored coat and designer sunglasses. She slid into the seat across from Aurora, smiling warmly. "You look terrible," she said. "Are you okay?" "I found out who killed my brother," Aurora said flatly. "Dominic Russo, Antonio's nephew. He orchestrated the vote, made sure Marco was eliminated, and then killed Antonio to cover his tracks." Valentina's smile didn't falter, but something shifted in her eyes. "That's quite an accusation." "It's the truth. I have evidence. Antonio's journal, photographs, a recording where he names Dominic as a traitor. And you're telling me this because? Because I want to know why you helped me. Why you encouraged me to humiliate Adrian at that gala. Why you fed me information. Why you pretended to be my ally." Aurora leaned forward. "You're working with Dominic, aren't you? You have been all along." Valentina removed her sunglasses slowly, her dark eyes appraising. "You're smarter than I gave you credit for. Answer the question." "My father has been trying to expand into Manhattan for years. Adrian Valerio controls the most profitable territory in the city, and he's too strong to challenge directly." Valentina's voice was cool, matter-of-fact. "Dominic approached us with a proposal. Help him undermine Adrian's authority, create chaos and instability, and when Adrian falls, we split the territory. My father gets Manhattan. Dominic consolidates everything else. And I was what? A convenient weapon? A grieving sister you could aim at Adrian like a loaded gun?" "You were perfect," Valentina said simply. "Genuine grief, real anger, completely believable. When you confronted Adrian at the gala, it wasn't staged or artificial. It was raw emotion, and that's exactly what we needed. Adrian looking weak, unable to control even a civilian woman with a grudge." Aurora's hands clenched into fists under the table. "My brother died. Antonio Russo died. And you're talking about it like it's just business strategy." "It is business strategy. This is the world we live in, Aurora. People die. Power shifts. You can either accept that and position yourself to benefit, or you can cling to naive ideas about justice and watch while others take what they want." "I'm going to destroy him," Aurora said quietly. "Dominic Russo. I'm going to make sure everyone knows what he did, and I'm going to watch him pay for it." Valentina laughed, bright and cold. "With what? Some old journal and a recording? You think that's enough? Dominic has been consolidating power for 3 years. He controls the New Jersey operations. He has alliances with half the families in New York, and he's blood. Adrian can't touch him without proof that's absolutely undeniable, and even then, it would tear the organization apart." "Then I guess it's going to tear apart. You're going to get yourself killed, or worse, you're going to get Adrian killed, and then Dominic wins anyway." Valentina stood, gathering her coat. "I liked you, Aurora. I genuinely did. You had fire, conviction. It's a shame you're wasting it on a war you can't win." She left the coffee shop without looking back. Aurora sat frozen, rage and grief warring inside her. Michael appeared at her elbow, sliding into the seat Valentina had vacated. "I recorded the whole conversation," he said quietly, showing her his phone. "We have her confession, her connection to Dominic. It's not enough, is it? Like she said, it's not enough to move against Dominic without starting a war." Maybe not." Michael's expression was grim. "But it's enough to start asking the right questions. Come on, Adrian's waiting." They met Adrian at a nondescript office building in Midtown, accessed through a private garage and a series of security checkpoints that made Aurora feel like she was entering a military installation. The conference room on the 20th floor had views of the city's skyline and enough electronic countermeasures to prevent any surveillance. Adrian was pacing when they entered, his usual control frayed at the edges. "You found it? You actually found it?" Michael laid out the evidence on the conference table. Journal, photographs, recorder. Everything. Antonio documented all of it. Adrian sank into a chair, picking up his mentor's journal with careful hands. As he read, Aurora watched emotions flicker across his face. Anger, grief, a deep, bone-weary sadness. "Dominic," he said finally. "My own cousin. Antonio tried to tell me, tried to warn me, and I didn't see it." "You couldn't have known," Michael said. "I should have. There were signs. Dominic pushing for aggressive expansion, questioning my decisions, building loyalty among the crews. Adrian set down the journal. He's been positioning himself to take over for 3 years, and I was too focused on holding everything together to notice. Aurora sat across from him. Valentina confirmed it. She and her father have been working with Dominic. The plan was to destabilize your leadership, make you look weak, and then move against you. The gala, Adrian said, looking at her. That wasn't just about revenge. It was theater, making me look like I couldn't even control one woman with a grudge. I'm sorry, Aurora said quietly. I didn't know. You thought I killed your brother. You had every reason to want me destroyed. Adrian's voice was rough. But now we know the truth. Dominic orchestrated Marco's death to bring federal heat and undermine my position. He killed Antonio to eliminate the one person who could have exposed him, and he's been building toward a coup ever since. So what do we do? Aurora asked. Adrian was quiet for a long moment, his dark eyes distant. Then he looked at Michael. Call a council meeting. All the senior crew, all the family heads. Tell them I have evidence of corruption that threatens the entire organization. They'll know you're moving against Dominic. Good. Let them know. Let them choose sides before the shooting starts. Adrian's voice was cold, controlled fury. Dominic wants a war? He's going to get one. But it's going to be fought with truth, not lies. And me? Aurora asked. Where do I fit in this? Adrian looked at her, something complicated in his expression. You're the witness. The proof that real people died because of Dominic's ambitions. When I present the evidence, I want you there. I want everyone to see the sister of the man Dominic had killed. Hear you explain what his manipulation cost. You want me to testify in front of a room full of Mafia bosses. I want you to stand beside me and demand justice. Can you do that? Aurora thought about Marco, about 3 years of grief and rage and misdirected revenge. She thought about Antonio Russo, who tried to save her brother and paid with his life. She thought about Dominic Russo and Valentina Corso, manipulating deaths and grief like pieces on a chessboard. Yes, she said, I can do that. The council meeting was set for 3 days later, giving Adrian time to reach out to allies, shore up support, and prepare for the confrontation. Aurora spent those days in a safe house with Michael, going through the evidence repeatedly, memorizing every detail. On the second night, Adrian visited. He dismissed Michael with a gesture, then sat across from Aurora in the safe house's kitchen. Can't sleep? He asked. Can you? Not for the past 3 years. Adrian poured himself a glass of water, offered her one. Every night I've wondered who killed Antonio, who I could trust, whether I was going to wake up with a bullet in my head. And now you know. Now I know, and somehow it's worse. Family betrayal always is. Adrian studied her across the table. You could still walk away. Take the evidence, give it to the FBI. Let them handle Dominic. You don't owe me anything. I owe Marco the truth. I owe him justice. Aurora met his gaze. And maybe I owe you an apology. For 3 years, I blamed you for something you didn't do. You had reason to blame me. It happened under my authority, in my organization. The guilt isn't entirely misplaced. But you tried to save him. You voted against killing him. And I failed. That's what matters. Adrian's voice was quiet, heavy. I was too young, too inexperienced to fight the older men effectively. I let them overrule me, and Marco died because of it. They sat in silence for a moment, the weight of shared grief and regret thick between them. After this is over, Aurora said slowly, what happens to me? I've made myself visible to your world. I've made enemies. Do I just go back to my normal life and hope no one comes after me? You could, Adrian said. Or you could stay. Stay? Work with me. You've proven you're smart, resourceful, willing to take risks. You understand loss and what motivates people. Those are valuable qualities. Adrian leaned forward. I need people I can trust, Aurora. Real trust, not the performance of loyalty that pervades this world. After Dominic is dealt with, I'm going to rebuild my organization, remove the rot. I could use someone like you. I'm not a criminal. Neither am I, technically. Most of what I do is legitimate business. Import-export, real estate, investments. The illegal parts are legacy operations I'm trying to phase out. Adrian's expression was earnest. I meant what I said about Antonio believing we needed to evolve. I want to honor that. build something better than what we inherited. Aurora studied him, this complicated man who'd been her enemy and was now her ally, who tried to save her brother and failed, who carried his own grief like a stone in his chest. "Ask me again after the council meeting," she said, "after we see if we survive." Adrian smiled faintly. Fair enough. The morning of the council meeting, Aurora woke to find Michael already awake, cleaning his gun at the kitchen table with methodical precision. The safe house felt smaller than it had the night before, the walls pressing in with the weight of what was coming. "You should eat something," Michael said without looking up from his work. "Going to be a long day." Aurora's stomach was too tight for food, but she forced down toast and coffee anyway. Adrian had told her the meeting would be held at a private estate in Westchester, neutral territory owned by one of the oldest families. Every major player would be there, the 7 men who'd voted to kill Marco, their associates, allies from other families, and Dominic Russo himself. "What happens if they don't believe us?" Aurora asked, watching Michael reassemble his weapon with practiced efficiency. "If Dominic has enough support to discredit the evidence? Then we fight our way out and hope Adrian's backup plan is better than his primary one." Michael slid the gun into his shoulder holster, met her eyes. But Antonio was respected. People knew him, trusted his judgment. If his own words condemn Dominic, that carries weight. And if it carries enough weight to start a civil war, then at least we'll know we were on the right side of it. The drive to Westchester took 90 minutes through heavy traffic, Michael behind the wheel of an armored SUV that felt like a tank. Aurora sat in the back, Antonio's journal in her lap, the weight of it somehow comforting. Physical proof, undeniable evidence. The dead man's testimony that would either bring justice or ignite chaos. Adrian called when they were 20 minutes out. "Change of plans. Dominic knows something's coming. He showed up early with 15 men, all armed. The other families are nervous." "Do we abort?" Michael asked, his voice tight. "No, we go forward, but Aurora stays in the car until I give the signal. I don't want her exposed if this goes sideways before we even present the evidence." "Adrian," Aurora started, "please." His voice was strained, urgent. "I need to know you're safe. I can't focus if I'm worried about you being in the crossfire." Aurora wanted to argue, to insist she could handle herself, but the raw concern in Adrian's voice stopped her. "Fine. But if shooting starts, I'm not just sitting here. If shooting starts, Michael will get you out. That's not negotiable." Adrian disconnected before she could respond. The estate was a sprawling stone mansion set back from the road, surrounded by manicured grounds and enough security to guard a head of state. Cars lined the circular driveway. Mercedes, BMWs, Escalades with tinted windows. Men in expensive suits clustered in small groups, their body language tense, hands hovering near concealed weapons. Michael parked away from the main entrance, positioning the SUV for a quick exit. Through the tinted windows, Aurora could see more men arriving, the crowd growing larger and more volatile by the minute. "This feels wrong," she said quietly. "Too many people, too much tension." But council meetings always feel like powder kegs. Everyone's armed, everyone's suspicious, and old grudges sit right under the surface. Michael's eyes never stopped scanning the crowd. "But you're right, this is worse than usual." Adrian appeared on the mansion's front steps, flanked by 2 men Aurora recognized from photographs, his most trusted lieutenants. He looked calm, controlled, every inch the leader as he surveyed the gathered families. When he spoke, his voice carried across the grounds with natural authority. "Thank you all for coming on short notice. I know you have questions about why I called this meeting. The matter we need to discuss affects every family here, every operation in the tri-state area. It concerns trust, loyalty, and betrayal at the highest levels of our organization." The crowd quieted, attention fixed on Adrian. Aurora saw Dominic Russo near the front, his expression carefully neutral, but his eyes were hard, calculating. Valentina Corso stood beside her father, her face a mask of polite interest. 3 years ago, Adrian continued, we lost 2 good men. Antonio Russo, my mentor and one of the most respected leaders in our history, and Marco Bianchi, a civilian who got caught up in our world and paid the ultimate price. At the time, we believed these deaths were unconnected. Antonio's murder was blamed on rivals. Marco's execution was deemed necessary by a vote of this council. Murmurs rippled through the crowd. Several men shifted uncomfortably. But I have recently obtained evidence that both deaths were orchestrated by the same person. Someone among us who manipulated events, who lied to this council, who murdered Antonio Russo to hide his own corruption and ambition. Adrian's gaze swept the crowd, landing on Dominic. Someone who has been working to undermine my leadership and destabilize our organization for his own benefit. Dominic stepped forward, his voice loud and confident. That's quite an accusation, cousin. I hope you have proof, because otherwise this sounds like paranoia, or worse, an attempt to consolidate power by eliminating rivals. I have proof. Adrian gestured toward the mansion entrance. Antonio kept detailed records. Everything is documented. The vote, the meetings, the financial transactions. He knew someone was moving against him, and he left evidence to expose them. Convenient that this evidence appears now, after 3 years. Dominic's voice dripped skepticism. How do we know it's authentic? How do we know you didn't fabricate this to justify moving against me? Because it's in Antonio's handwriting, because it includes details only he would have known, and because his final recording names you specifically as a traitor. Adrian pulled out a small speaker, pressed play. Antonio's voice filled the grounds, rough and weary, but unmistakably genuine. The crowd listened in absolute silence as he detailed Dominic's betrayal, his meetings with the Corso family, his manipulation of the vote to kill Marco Bianchi. When the recording ended, the silence was deafening. Dominic's carefully controlled expression finally cracked, fury bleeding through. This proves nothing. My uncle was old, paranoid, seeing conspiracies everywhere. He was losing his edge, making mistakes. And yes, I questioned some of his decisions. That doesn't make me a traitor. It makes you a liar, Adrian said coldly. You voted to execute Marco Bianchi knowing it would bring federal attention. You wanted chaos, wanted me to look weak and indecisive. And when Antonio figured out what you were doing, you had him killed. I was in Boston when Antonio died. I have witnesses, alibis. You hired it out. We both know how that works. Adrian descended the steps, moving closer to his cousin. You wanted everything he built, everything I inherited, and you were willing to murder family to get it. Dominic's hand moved toward his jacket, and suddenly 20 guns appeared in the hands of men loyal to Adrian. The crowd scattered, people diving for cover, shouting, filling the air. Don't, Adrian said quietly, his own weapon trained on Dominic's chest. Don't make this worse than it already is. Worse? Dominic laughed, wild and bitter. You think this can get worse? You just accused me of murder in front of the entire council. There's no walking back from this, Adrian. Either you kill me now, or I kill you. Those are the only options left. There's a third option. Adrian's voice was steady despite the chaos around them. You confess. Tell everyone the truth. Face judgment from the council instead of execution in a parking lot. And you think they'll be merciful, that your evidence will save you when half these families want your territory? Dominic's eyes were feverish, desperate. You're not strong enough to hold what Antonio built. You never were. You're too soft, too idealistic. This world needs men who understand that power is the only thing that matters. Power without honor is just thuggery, Adrian said. Antonio taught me that. He taught you that too before you forgot. Antonio was weak. He died because he couldn't see that the old ways were finished. Dominic's hand twitched toward his weapon again. Just like you're going to die because you can't accept that I'm better suited to lead. The gunshot came from nowhere Aurora could see, a sharp crack that shattered the tense standoff. Dominic staggered, his hand flying to his shoulder where blood bloomed across his expensive shirt. More shots followed, and then the world exploded into violence. Michael yanked Aurora down in her seat as bullets shattered the SUV's windows. Stay down! Don't move! But Aurora couldn't see what was happening, couldn't tell who was shooting at whom. She grabbed Michael's backup gun from the glove compartment, her hands shaking but her resolve steady. I'm not hiding while Adrian's out there. Aurora, no! She was already out of the vehicle, staying low, using parked cars as cover. The mansion grounds had become a war zone, men shooting, others running for cover, bodies already on the ground. Aurora spotted Adrian behind a stone planter, exchanging fire with someone she couldn't see, blood streaming from a cut above his eye. Dominic was nowhere visible, But Valentina Corso was directing her father's men with cold efficiency, pointing toward Adrian's position. Aurora made a decision that was either brilliant or suicidal. She ran toward Valentina, gun raised, shouting to be heard over the gunfire. "Call them off! Call off your men or I swear I'll shoot you right here." Valentina spun, her eyes widening in surprise that quickly turned to calculation. "You won't. You're not a killer, Aurora. You're just a grieving sister playing at revenge." "Try me." Aurora's voice was deadly calm, the gun steady in her hands. "My brother is dead. Antonio Russo is dead. I've lost everything that mattered to me. Do you really think I'm afraid of adding your name to that list?" For a long moment they stared at each other while chaos raged around them. Then Valentina raised her hand, shouted something in Italian that made her father's men lower their weapons. "You're making a mistake," Valentina said quietly. "Dominic might have orchestrated this, but Adrian is still weak. He can't hold this territory against everyone who wants it. Sooner or later someone will take him down, and everyone loyal to him will fall too." "Maybe," Aurora said. "Or maybe he's stronger than you think. Maybe having people who are genuinely loyal instead of just afraid makes all the difference." Before Valentina could respond, Michael appeared at Aurora's side, his gun trained on Valentina. "We need to move. Dominic's men are regrouping near the west entrance." Valentina backed away slowly, her hands raised in mock surrender. "This isn't over, Aurora. Remember that." Michael pulled Aurora toward where Adrian was still pinned down, providing covering fire. They reached him together, and Adrian's expression when he saw Aurora was equal parts relief and fury. "I told you to stay in the car. And I told you I wasn't sitting out if shooting started." Aurora handed him Michael's backup gun. "Where's Dominic?" "He ran into the mansion, wounded but mobile." Adrian wiped blood from his eye with the back of his hand. "We need to end this now before more people die." "The council?" "The council just watched Dominic's men open fire during a negotiation. Whatever support he had, he's lost most of it." Adrian looked toward the mansion. "But if he escapes, if he has time to regroup and spin this his way, we'll be fighting this war for years." "Then we go after him," Michael said grimly. "Finish this." The three of them moved toward the mansion together, Adrian leading with Michael and Aurora flanking him. Other men joined them, Adrian's loyalists, people who'd witnessed Dominic's betrayal and made their choice. Inside, the mansion was chaos. Overturned furniture, shattered glass, the acrid smell of gunpowder. They cleared rooms methodically, Adrian's team moving with military precision. They found Dominic in Antonio's old study on the second floor, surrounded by 3 of his remaining men. He'd barricaded the door, but Adrian's people broke through with controlled violence. The fight was brief and brutal. Michael took out 2 of Dominic's guards while Aurora stayed back, her gun trained on the 3rd man until he dropped his weapon and surrendered. That left Dominic, wounded and cornered, pressed against Antonio's old desk with nowhere left to run. Adrian entered the study slowly, his weapon lowered but ready. "It's over, Dominic." "It's not over until one of us is dead." Dominic's voice was thick with pain, his shoulders still bleeding freely. "You know that. This world doesn't have room for both of us anymore. You made that choice. You chose ambition over family, power over honor. You killed Antonio, the man who raised us both, who taught us everything we know." Adrian's voice cracked with emotion. "How could you do that? How could you murder your own uncle?" "Because he was holding us back," Dominic shouted. He and his idealistic nonsense about evolution, about legitimacy, about building something better. This world doesn't reward idealism, Adrian. It rewards strength, ruthlessness, the willingness to do whatever it takes. And look where it got you, bleeding, alone, betrayed by everyone who you thought would stand with you. Adrian moved closer. Was it worth it? Was all this death and manipulation worth ending up here? Dominic laughed bitterly. You tell me. You're about to execute family. How does that make you any different from me? I'm not executing you. The council will decide your fate. The council? Dominic's eyes were wild. They'll rip me apart. You know what they do to traitors. It would be kinder to shoot me now. Kindness, Adrian said quietly, is something you stopped deserving when you killed Antonio. He gestured to Michael, who moved forward with zip ties. As Michael secured Dominic's hands behind his back, Aurora stepped into the room fully for the first time. Dominic's eyes focused on her, recognition and something like regret flickering across his face. The Bianchi girl. I'm sorry about your brother. Truly. He wasn't supposed to be part of this. But he was, Aurora said, her voice steady despite the rage burning in her chest. You used his death. You weaponized my grief. You turned Marco into a political tool and then had the audacity to act like it was just business. It was business, all of it, nothing personal. My brother was a person. Aurora's control finally broke, her voice rising. Antonio was a person. They had lives, people who loved them, futures that you stole. And you call it business like that makes it acceptable, like that absolves you of responsibility for the bodies you left behind. Dominic looked away, his jaw tight. For the first time, he seemed diminished, smaller than the ambitious schemer who'd orchestrated so much death. Adrian's phone buzzed. He checked it, his expression hardening. The council is reconvening. They want Dominic brought before them. They want to hear his confession. I'm not confessing to anything, Dominic spat. Then you'll die maintaining a lie everyone already knows is true. Your choice. Adrian nodded to Michael, who hauled Dominic to his feet with no gentleness at all. They brought him down to the main hall, where the surviving council members had gathered. The room was tense, angry, men who'd witnessed betrayal and violence demanding answers. Vincent Calabrese, one of the 7 who'd voted to kill Marco, stepped forward as unofficial spokesman. Adrian Valerio, you've made serious accusations against Dominic Russo. We've heard Antonio's recording, but we need more. We need confession or undeniable proof before we can take action against one of our own. Adrian held up Antonio's journal. This contains 3 years of observations, meetings, financial records. Antonio documented everything. Dominic's meetings with the Corso family, the manipulation of the vote to execute Marco Bianchi, the corruption of our operations for personal gain. It's all here, in Antonio's own hand. He passed the journal to Vincent, who read through it with growing horror. Other council members crowded around, their expressions darkening as they processed what they were seeing. This is... Vincent looked up, his face ashen. If this is authentic, Dominic didn't just betray Adrian. He betrayed all of us. Every decision we made for the past 3 years was based on false information, manipulation, lies. It's authentic, Michael said. I was Antonio's personal security. I recognize his handwriting, his patterns. That journal is genuine. Dominic? Vincent turned to the wounded man. What do you have to say to these charges? Dominic stood straighter despite his injury, his expression defiant. I say Adrian is using his dead mentor's paranoid ramblings to eliminate a rival. He's always resented my success in New Jersey, always questioned my methods. This is just his attempt to consolidate power by removing anyone who might challenge him. Then explain the meetings with the Corso family, Vincent said. Explain the photographs, the financial transfers, the recording where Antonio specifically names you as a traitor. Antonio was old. He was losing his grip on reality. As for the Corsos, yes, I met with them. We all have relationships with other families. That doesn't make me a traitor. You orchestrated my brother's death, Aurora said, her voice cutting through the room. You pushed for his execution knowing it would bring federal attention, knowing it would destabilize Adrian's leadership. You used Marco's life as a political weapon. Your brother was an informant, Dominic shot back. He was betraying all of us. His death was justice, not murder. And Antonio? Adrian's voice was cold, controlled fury. Was his death justice too? When he figured out what you were doing, when he started gathering evidence against you, did you consider that justice when you had him killed? I didn't kill Antonio. You ordered it. You hired it out while you were conveniently in Boston, establishing an alibi. Adrian moved closer to his cousin. Did you even hesitate? Or was murdering the man who raised you just another business decision? Something broke in Dominic's expression, the defiance cracking to reveal the desperation underneath. He was going to ruin everything. He was going to expose me, turn the council against me, destroy everything I'd built. I didn't have a choice. The room went silent. The admission hung in the air like smoke, undeniable and damning. Vincent Calabrese stepped back, his expression horrified. You just confessed to murder, to betraying this council. Dominic seemed to realize what he'd said, his face going pale. That's not what I meant. It's exactly what you meant, Adrian said quietly. You killed Antonio Russo. You manipulated this council. You betrayed every principle this organization was built on. Vincent looked around at the other council members, reading their expressions. We need to vote on Dominic's fate, on how we handle this betrayal. No vote needed, another council member said. Tony Ricci, another of the 7 who'd voted to kill Marco. The law is clear. Betrayal of family, murder of leadership, working with outside families against our interests. The penalty is death. Wait. Dominic's eyes were wild now, looking for support and finding none. You can't just... I deserve a proper hearing, a chance to defend myself. You had your chance, Vincent said. You confessed. In front of witnesses, in front of this council. There's nothing left to deliberate. Adrian. Dominic turned to his cousin, desperation bleeding through. Please, we're blood, family. Doesn't that mean anything? Adrian looked at him for a long moment, and Aurora saw something complicated in his expression. Grief, anger, the weight of impossible choices. Family, Adrian said quietly, meant everything to Antonio, and you killed him anyway. You taught me that blood doesn't guarantee loyalty, that family is built through trust and honor, not just shared names. He stepped back. The council has spoken. I won't override their judgment. 2 men moved forward, taking Dominic by the arms. He struggled briefly, then seemed to accept the futility of resistance. Take him out of the city, Vincent ordered. Make it clean, no suffering. As they led Dominic toward the door, he looked back at Adrian one last time. You'll regret this. Killing family. It changes you. You think you're stronger than me, better than me, but you're about to learn we're exactly the same. No, Adrian said. We're nothing alike. You chose ambition over honor. I'm choosing justice over blood. That's the difference between us. Dominic was gone, dragged away by men who'd once called him friend. The council members began filing out, their conversations muted, processing the violence and betrayal they'd witnessed. Vincent approached Adrian, his expression grave. This was necessary, but it's going to have consequences. Dominic had allies, people who benefited from his operations. They're not going to just accept this. I know, Adrian said, but we'll handle it together, transparently. No more secrets, no more manipulation. We rebuild this organization the way Antonio wanted, with honor and legitimacy. Vincent nodded slowly. I voted to kill Marco Bianchi 3 years ago. I listened to Dominic's arguments, his manipulation, and I voted for execution when I should have asked more questions. That's on me. On all of us who voted that day. You didn't know, see. We should have known. We should have demanded more proof, more investigation. A man died because we were lazy and complacent. Vincent looked at Aurora. I can't bring your brother back, but I can promise you that his death won't be forgotten, that the lessons we learned from this will change how we operate going forward. Aurora didn't know what to say. Part of her still wanted to scream at him, to rage against the casual way these men had voted to end Marco's life. But she also saw genuine remorse in Vincent's eyes, real recognition of the harm caused. Just do better, she said finally. Honor his memory by being better than you were 3 years ago. Vincent nodded and left, the other council members following. Finally, it was just Adrian, Michael, and Aurora in the devastated mansion hall. The adrenaline was draining away, leaving Aurora shaking with delayed reaction. Her hands trembled as she set down the gun she'd been holding, suddenly aware of how close she'd come to using it. Adrian moved to her side, his hand gentle on her shoulder. Are you all right? I don't know, Aurora admitted. I thought, when this was over, when we had justice, I thought I'd feel different. Better, maybe. But I just feel tired. Justice doesn't heal grief, Adrian said quietly. It just closes a chapter so you can start writing the next one. What happens now? Aurora asked. With Dominic gone, with everything out in the open. Now we rebuild. There will be challenges, people testing my leadership, families trying to exploit the instability, but we'll handle it. Adrian looked at her, something uncertain in his expression. The question is whether you'll be part of that rebuilding. My offer still stands. Work with me. Help me build something better than what we inherited. Aurora thought about Marco, about the brother who'd gotten caught up in this world and paid with his life. She thought about Antonio Russo, who'd tried to evolve this brutal system into something more honorable. She thought about 3 years of grief and rage that had led her to this moment, standing in the ruins of a war she'd helped expose. "I need time," she said, "to process all this, to figure out what I want. But ask me again in a month, and maybe I'll have an answer." Adrian smiled faintly. "Fair enough." Michael cleared his throat. "We should go. Local authorities are going to respond to reports of gunfire eventually, and we don't want to be here when they arrive." They left the mansion together, stepping out into afternoon sunlight that seemed impossibly bright after the darkness inside. Bodies were being removed, cars were departing, and the Westchester estate was slowly returning to the peaceful facade it had maintained before the violence. Aurora climbed into the SUV beside Michael, Adrian following them in a separate vehicle with his security team. As they drove back toward the city, Aurora watched the scenery pass and wondered what happened next, what shape her life would take now that revenge had been achieved and justice delivered. Her phone buzzed with a text from Valentina. "You won today. But remember what I said. This isn't over. There will always be someone looking to take what Adrian has. Stay vigilant." Aurora deleted the message without responding. Valentina was right that the threats would continue, that this world didn't offer permanent safety or lasting peace. But for now, for today, they'd won. The truth had been exposed, the guilty punished, and the foundation laid for something better. That would have to be enough. The city felt different when they returned. Aurora sat in the safe house that night, staring at her hands, still feeling the weight of the gun she'd held, still hearing Dominic's confession echoing in her mind. Michael had gone to debrief with Adrian's security team, leaving her alone with her thoughts and the silence that felt heavier than any noise. Her phone rang just after midnight, Adrian's name on the screen. "Can't sleep either?" she answered. "Every time I close my eyes, I see Antonio's face, and Dominic's, the cousin I grew up with and the traitor he became." Adrian's voice was rough, exhausted. "I keep wondering if there was something I missed, some moment where I could have stopped all this before it started." "You can't think like that. Dominic made his choices, and I made mine, choosing the council's judgment over family, letting them execute him." A long pause. "He was right about one thing. Killing family does change you. I can feel it already, this weight that won't lift." Aurora pulled her knees to her chest, the phone pressed against her ear. "My mother used to say that grief and guilt are just love with nowhere to go. You loved your cousin once, loved the person he used to be before ambition corrupted him. That love doesn't disappear just because he became someone unrecognizable." "How do you do that?" Adrian asked quietly. "Find the right words when everything feels wrong?" "I don't know that they're right. I just know that 3 years of grief taught me that carrying it alone makes it heavier. Sometimes you need someone else to help shoulder the weight." "Is that an offer?" Aurora surprised herself by smiling. "Maybe. Or maybe I'm just too tired to maintain proper emotional distance." "Good. Because I could use a friend right now, and you're the only person who understands what today cost." They talked for another hour, the conversation drifting from the violence at the estate to memories of the people they'd lost, to the impossible task of building something better from the ruins of the old system. By the time they hung up, Aurora felt something shift inside her. Not healing exactly, but the first fragile sense that healing might be possible someday. The next morning brought consequences. Vincent Calabrese called a follow-up meeting, this one smaller and more controlled than the chaotic gathering at the Westchester estate. Adrian, Aurora, Michael, and the 7 council members who'd voted on Marco's execution 3 years ago gathered in a private room at an upscale Manhattan restaurant, the kind of place where the walls were thick and the staff knew not to ask questions. "We need to address the fallout," Vincent said without preamble. "Dominic's execution has created a power vacuum in New Jersey. His lieutenants are scrambling, some looking to take over his operations, others reaching out to rival families for protection." "Let them scramble," Tony Ricci said dismissively. "Anyone loyal to Dominic after what he did isn't someone we want in our organization." "It's not that simple." Adrian leaned forward, his fingers steepled on the table. "If we don't establish clear leadership in New Jersey, someone else will. The Corso family is already making moves, testing our boundaries. We need to move decisively but carefully." "What do you propose?" Vincent asked. "We clean house. Anyone who was actively working with Dominic against the organization's interests gets removed. But we don't punish people for simple loyalty. Following orders from their boss isn't a crime. We offer them a choice: join the new structure under honest leadership, or leave the business entirely with their lives intact. One of the other council members, Frank Battaglia, shook his head. That's weak. It makes us look soft, like we're afraid to take hard action. It makes us look smart, Adrian countered. Dominic's greatest weapon was turning people against each other, creating chaos and fear. If we respond with more violence, more purges, we're just continuing his work. We break the cycle by offering something different: stability, honor, a chance to be part of something better than what we had.
Antonio's influence, Vincent said softly. I can hear him in your words. Because he was right. The old ways are dying. We either evolve or we become irrelevant, crushed between law enforcement on one side and our own internal conflicts on the other. Adrian looked around the table. I'm not asking you to trust me blindly. I'm asking you to try a different approach for 6 months. If it doesn't work, if we lose territory or influence, then we revisit the strategy. But give me a chance to prove that Antonio's vision can work. The council members exchanged glances, silent communication passing between them. Finally, Vincent nodded. 6 months. But we need transparency. Regular updates, honest assessments of what's working and what isn't. No more secrets like the ones that let Dominic operate unchecked for 3 years. Agreed, Adrian said. Complete transparency. Frank Battaglia turned his attention to Aurora, his expression skeptical. And what's her role in all this? She's not family, not maid, not even connected to our world except through her dead brother. Why is she at this table? Aurora met his gaze steadily, refusing to be intimidated. Because I helped expose the truth about Dominic. Because I risked my life gathering evidence that saved your organization from being torn apart from the inside. And because Adrian trusts me, which should count for something. Trust from a boss who's barely 35 and just executed his own cousin. Forgive me if I need more than that. Frank? Vincent's voice was sharp. She has a point. Without her, we'd still be operating under Dominic's manipulation. Show some respect. I'm just saying what everyone's thinking. She doesn't belong here. Aurora stood, her chair scraping against the floor. You're right. I don't belong here. I'm not part of your world, and I don't want to be. But I earned the right to see this through, to make sure my brother's death actually meant something. So you can either accept my presence for the next 6 months while Adrian rebuilds, or you can continue questioning me and waste everyone's time. Your choice. She walked out of the room before anyone could respond, her heart pounding but her head high. In the hallway outside, she leaned against the wall and took a shaky breath. Adrian appeared a moment later. That was either very brave or very stupid. Probably both, Aurora laughed without humor. I just told a room full of Mafia bosses to deal with my presence. My survival instincts are clearly broken. Frank's an old-school hardliner. He doesn't trust change or anyone who represents it. Adrian moved closer, his voice dropping. But he also respects strength. You standing up to him, refusing to be dismissed. That registered. He might not like you, but he'll think twice before underestimating you again. Is this what your life is like? Constant power plays and dominance displays? More or less. It's exhausting. Adrian ran a hand through his hair. But it's also the reality we're working within. Every interaction is a negotiation. Every conversation a test. You have to decide whether you're up for that long term. Aurora studied him, this complicated man who carried the weight of an empire on his shoulders, who'd chosen justice over family, and now lived with the consequences. Ask me in 6 months, she said, like you promised. Over the following weeks, Aurora found herself drawn deeper into Adrian's world despite her reservations. He made good on his promise of transparency, including her in strategy sessions and decisions about restructuring the New Jersey operations. She learned the language of this life, the careful negotiations, the unspoken rules, the delicate balance between showing strength and avoiding unnecessary conflict. Michael became her guide and unexpected friend, teaching her how to read a room, how to spot threats, how to carry herself with the confidence this world demanded. You're a natural, he told her one afternoon as they reviewed security protocols for a meeting with a potentially hostile family. You understand people, motivations. That's rarer than you think in this business.
I understand grief and anger. That's not the same as understanding criminal enterprise. It's exactly the same. This whole world runs on grief and anger, on old wounds and desperate attempts to gain enough power that you never feel vulnerable again. Michael's expression was distant. Antonio understood that. He tried to break the cycle, create something based on mutual benefit instead of fear. That's what Adrian's trying to do now, and why he needs people like you, people who haven't been so damaged by this life that they've forgotten there are other ways to operate. The New Jersey transition took 3 weeks of careful negotiation. Adrian personally met with each of Dominic's former lieutenants, offering them the choice he'd outlined to the council. Some took the out, disappearing into legitimate businesses or leaving the tri-state area entirely. Others pledged loyalty to the new structure, swearing they'd been following Dominic's orders without knowing the full extent of his betrayal. A few refused both options and had to be dealt with more harshly. Aurora wasn't present for those conversations, but she saw the weight they added to Adrian's shoulders, the way his eyes grew harder after each difficult decision. The Corso family proved to be the bigger problem. With Dominic gone, they lost their insider connection and leverage over Adrian's organization. Valentina's father, Salvatore Corso, responded by becoming more aggressive, pushing into territory that had previously been undisputed, testing boundaries to see how far he could go before Adrian pushed back. He's trying to provoke a war, Vincent explained during one tense strategy session. If he can make you look weak, unable to defend your territory, other families will start circling. You need to respond, show strength. Measured strength, Adrian corrected. We hit back, but proportionally. We defend our territory without escalating into open conflict. Salvatore wants me to overreact, to become the aggressor so he can play victim and build alliances against me. Walking a very fine line, Tony Ricci observed. One mistake and this blows up in our faces. Aurora listened to the tactical discussions, the careful calculations of violence and restraint, and felt increasingly uneasy. This was the reality of Adrian's world, even with the best intentions, even trying to be better than their predecessors. They still operated in a system where violence was the ultimate currency. That night, she confronted Adrian in his office, her frustration finally boiling over. Is this what Antonio wanted? Endless cycles of territorial disputes and careful escalations? Because it looks an awful lot like the same old game with slightly more polite rules. Adrian looked up from the reports he'd been reviewing, exhaustion evident in his face. What do you want me to say? That I can magically transform centuries of tradition overnight? That I can make rival families stop being rivals through sheer force of will? I want you to tell me this is actually going somewhere. That we're not just rearranging deck chairs while the whole ship continues sinking. We are going somewhere. It's just slower than either of us would like. Adrian stood, moving around his desk to face her directly. 6 weeks ago, Dominic was actively working to undermine everything Antonio built. Now he's gone, his corruption exposed, and we're implementing actual reforms. That's progress. It doesn't feel like progress. It feels like we traded one set of problems for a slightly different set of problems. Because that's what real change looks like. Not dramatic revolution, but incremental improvement. Making things 5% better, then another 5%, until eventually you look back and realize you've transformed the entire system. Adrian's voice was patient, but firm. I know it's frustrating. I know you want immediate results. But this is going to take years, Aurora. Years of careful work, constant vigilance, and accepting that some days we're just going to be preventing things from getting worse instead of making them dramatically better. Aurora sank into one of his office chairs, her anger deflating into weariness. I don't know if I have years to give to this. I didn't sign up for a lifetime commitment to reforming the Mafia from the inside. I know, and I won't hold you to anything you didn't explicitly promise. Adrian sat across from her, his dark eyes serious. But I hope you'll stay. Not because I need your help, though I do, but because I think you need this too. You need to see Marco's death mean something beyond just revenge. You need closure that comes from building something positive instead of just tearing down what was broken. He was right, and Aurora hated how clearly he could see through her. When did you become so good at reading people? Antonio taught me. He said the best leaders aren't the strongest or the smartest. They're the ones who understand what motivates the people around them. Adrian smiled faintly. Also, you're not that hard to read. You have very expressive eyes. Before Aurora could respond, Michael burst into the office without knocking. We have a problem. The Corsos just hit one of our warehouses in Queens. 4 of our guys are dead, and they left a message. Adrian was on his feet immediately, his exhaustion replaced by sharp focus. What message? Dominic's protection is gone. Time to renegotiate terms. They're demanding a sit-down. Tomorrow, neutral ground. Michael's expression was grim. It's a power play. They want to see if you'll cave under pressure. Then we give them their meeting, Adrian said coldly. But on our terms, not theirs. Set it up for tomorrow evening, the Ravello restaurant in Midtown. Public enough to discourage violence, but private enough for honest conversation. You can't go in there without serious backup, Aurora said, alarmed. This could be a trap, an ambush disguised as a negotiation. It's always a trap. The question is whether you're smart enough to see it coming and prepared enough to survive it anyway. Adrian turned to Michael. Full security detail. I want the restaurant swept in advance, our people positioned at all entry points, and a backup team 2 blocks away in case things go sideways. Already planning it, Michael confirmed. What about her? He nodded toward Aurora. She stays somewhere safe. Like hell I do, Aurora shot back. You're walking into a potential ambush with the family that's been working against you for years. I'm not sitting on the sidelines. Aurora, you said I was part of this, that I earned my place, so let me be part of it. I'll stay back, stay safe, but I'm not being left behind like a child while you risk your life. Adrian looked like he wanted to argue, but something in her expression stopped him. Fine, but you follow Michael's instructions exactly. If he says move, you move. If he says hide, you hide. Understood? Understood. The next evening, Aurora found herself in a surveillance van a block from Ravello, watching multiple video feeds as Adrian and a small team entered the restaurant. The place had been swept 3 times. Michael's team had found 2 listening devices and 1 camera, all disabled and removed. Now they had their own surveillance in place, watching every angle. Salvatore Corso arrived 15 minutes late with Valentina and 4 bodyguards, a deliberate power move designed to make Adrian wait. Aurora watched on the monitors as the 2 groups sized each other up across an elegantly set table in Ravello's private dining room. Valerio, Salvatore said, his voice carrying clearly through the hidden microphones. Thank you for agreeing to meet. You killed 4 of my people and demanded a meeting. That's not exactly a request I could ignore. Adrian's voice was controlled, but Aurora could hear the anger underneath. A regrettable necessity. You've been so busy restructuring your New Jersey operations. I wanted to make sure you hadn't forgotten about your obligations to your neighbors. Salvatore smiled, the expression not reaching his eyes. Dominic and I had an understanding. Certain territories, certain operations, we cooperated, shared resources. Now that he's gone, I think it's time we formalize those arrangements. Dominic was a traitor who was executed for betraying this organization. Any arrangements he made were unauthorized and therefore void. Is that your final answer? Because it seems short-sighted. Valentina leaned forward, her voice smooth. You've made a lot of enemies recently, Adrian. Killing family, restructuring operations, changing decades of established protocol. People are nervous. They're wondering if you're stable, if you can be trusted with the kind of power you've inherited. People can wonder all they want. My actions speak for themselves. Do they? Salvatore pulled out a folder, slid it across the table. Because these financial records suggest you've been diverting funds from the traditional operations into legitimate businesses. Real estate, import-export, investment portfolios. You're going soft, Valerio. Trying to make the family legitimate when we all know that's impossible. Adrian opened the folder, scanned the contents, his expression unreadable. Where did you get these? Does it matter? The point is you're weakening the organization. Dominic saw it, tried to stop it, and you killed him for it. How long before you decide anyone who questions your vision is a traitor who needs to be eliminated? In the van, Aurora felt her stomach tighten. This was the real attack. Not physical violence, but a political assault on Adrian's legitimacy and leadership. Salvatore was trying to paint him as unstable, dangerous, a leader who killed family and betrayed tradition. Dominic saw an opportunity to seize power, Adrian said evenly. He manipulated council votes, orchestrated murders, and worked with your family to undermine my authority. That's not vision, it's treason. And yes, I had him executed for it, because that's what our laws demand. Laws you're now trying to change. Tell me, Valerio, what happens when you've made the organization so legitimate that it no longer serves the purposes it was built for? When you've neutered it so completely that we become irrelevant? What happens is we survive. We adapt to a changing world instead of clinging to methods that guarantee our extinction. Adrian leaned back, his posture relaxed but his eyes sharp. But you didn't bring me here to debate philosophy. You want something, so stop posturing and tell me what it is. Salvatore's smile widened. Smart. I like that about you, Valerio. When you're not executing family members, you can be quite reasonable. Here's what I want. The Brooklyn waterfront operations that Dominic promised me. The import channels through the container ports. And a seat on your council for Valentina to ensure our families maintain open communication. In exchange for what? In exchange for not telling every other family in the tri-state area that you're systematically dismantling the organization from the inside. In exchange for not building a coalition against you that would make Dominic's little rebellion look like a minor inconvenience. Salvatore's voice hardened. You're vulnerable right now, Adrian. You've made enemies of the traditionalists, you've disrupted established power structures, and you've shown you're willing to kill family when they oppose you. I'm offering you peace, stability. All you have to do is share what Dominic already promised. Aurora watched Adrian's face on the monitor, saw him processing the threat, calculating options. This was the choice Antonio had warned about. Compromise your principles or fight a war on multiple fronts. No, Adrian said simply. Salvatore's expression darkened. Excuse me? No, I'm not giving you the waterfront operations, no council seat for Valentina, and definitely no legitimacy for arrangements Dominic made while actively betraying my organization. Adrian stood, his team standing with him. You want war? We'll have war. But you're not going to extort concessions from me by threatening to spread rumors I'm already working to change. You're making a mistake, Valentina said, her voice sharp. Maybe, but it's my mistake to make, and I'll live with the consequences. Adrian headed toward the door, then paused and turned back. One more thing. Your intelligence network is good. You got those financial records from someone inside my organization. But it's not perfect. Those documents you showed me? They're 6 months old from before I restructured our security protocols. Which means your source is either cut off or feeding you outdated information. Either way, you're operating blind. He left without waiting for a response, his security team forming up around him as they exited the restaurant. In the van, Michael was already moving, starting the engine. That went about as badly as it could have. We need to get him secure now. They rendezvoused 3 blocks away, Adrian and his team piling into reinforced vehicles for the drive back to his headquarters. Aurora rode with Adrian, watching his face for signs of stress or doubt. You just declared war on the Corso family, she said quietly. Was that the smart play? It was the only play. Giving in to extortion, compromising our position, that would have made me look weak. And in this world, looking weak is the same as being weak. Adrian loosened his tie, the tension finally showing. Salvatore is going to make this ugly. He'll reach out to every family that's nervous about my changes, build a coalition, try to isolate us politically before moving to actual violence. Can we survive that? I don't know, but I know we couldn't survive me becoming someone who gives in to threats, who abandons principles the moment they become inconvenient. Adrian looked at her, his dark eyes intense. Antonio used to say that integrity is what you do when the consequences are terrible. This is my integrity test. I just hope I'm strong enough to pass it. The war Salvatore Corso threatened began not with bullets, but with whispers. Over the next 2 weeks, Adrian's network of informants reported increasing hostility from families that had previously been neutral or mildly supportive. Business relationships cooled. Lucrative contracts mysteriously fell through. Longtime allies suddenly had concerns about Adrian's leadership style and long-term vision. He's turning us into pariahs, Vincent Calabrese said during an emergency council meeting. 3 families have broken off contact entirely. 4 more are making noises about renegotiating terms for shared operations. If this continues, we'll be completely isolated within a month. Then we don't let it continue, Adrian said. We reach out to our genuine allies, the families who actually share our vision for evolution. We build a counter-coalition based on mutual interest instead of fear. That's a long-term strategy. What about the short term? Tony Ricci demanded. Salvatore hit another one of our operations last night, a gambling house in the Bronx. He's bleeding us, testing our response, and we're just talking about building coalitions. Because responding with equivalent violence is exactly what he wants. It makes us look like the aggressors, gives him justification to escalate, and potentially draws in families that might otherwise stay neutral. Adrian's voice was firm. We defend our territory, we protect our people, but we don't escalate beyond what's necessary. That's the kind of thinking that gets you killed, Frank Battaglia said bluntly. Salvatore respects strength, not restraint. Hit him back harder than he hit you. Make him understand there are consequences. The council erupted into argument, voices overlapping as different factions advocated for different strategies. Aurora watched Adrian trying to maintain control, trying to build consensus, and saw the toll it was taking. Every day brought new challenges, new threats, new tests of his leadership. That night, exhausted and frustrated, Adrian showed up at the safe house where Aurora was staying. He looked terrible, dark circles under his eyes, stubble shadowing his jaw, his usual meticulous appearance frayed around the edges. "Tell me I'm doing the right thing," he said without preamble. "Tell me this strategy isn't just going to get everyone I care about killed." Aurora pulled him inside, sat him down, and poured him a drink he didn't touch. "I can't tell you that. I don't know if it's the right strategy or a disaster waiting to happen, but I can tell you that every alternative is worse." "How do you figure?" "Because the alternative is becoming like Dominic, compromising everything you believe in to hold on to power, or becoming like Salvatore, using fear and violence to enforce your will. Those paths might work short-term, but they destroy you long-term." Aurora sat across from him. "Antonio chose you for a reason. He saw something in you that made him believe you could do this differently, that you could break the cycle. Maybe trust that judgment. Antonio's dead. Maybe his judgment wasn't as good as everyone thought. Or maybe he knew this would be hard and believed you were strong enough to handle it anyway." Aurora reached across the space between them, took his hand. "You're not alone in this, Adrian. You have people who believe in what you're trying to build. Let us help carry the weight." Adrian looked at their joined hands, something vulnerable flickering across his face. "I'm tired, Aurora. Tired of fighting, tired of watching good people die for bad reasons, tired of wondering if I'm strong enough to actually change anything." "Then rest. Not forever, just for tonight. Tomorrow you can go back to being the fearless leader. But right now, just be human." He pulled her closer, and Aurora went willingly, letting him rest his head against her shoulder. They sat like that for a long time, drawing comfort from simple human connection, from not having to be strong or strategic or anything except two people who'd survived terrible things and were trying to build something better from the wreckage. When Adrian finally left, well past midnight, Aurora found herself hoping desperately that his strategy would work, that restraint and integrity would somehow triumph over the brutal mathematics of violence and power. But hope, she was learning, was sometimes all you had when the world demanded impossible choices and offered no guarantees. The next morning brought news that changed everything. Michael arrived at dawn, his expression grim but energized. "Salvatore made a mistake," he said, pulling up surveillance footage on his laptop. "Last night's hit on our gambling operation. One of his guys got sloppy, left evidence. We have video of the attack, clear shots of their faces, proof that this was a coordinated assault authorized by the Corso family." Aurora leaned over his shoulder, watching the grainy footage. "How does that help us?" "Because unsanctioned violence against another family violates council protocols. Salvatore's been positioning this as righteous pushback against Adrian's radical changes, claiming moral high ground. But this proves he's just a territorial aggressor looking to exploit perceived weakness." Michael's smile was sharp. "Adrian can take this to the larger council, the one that governs disputes between families. Force Salvatore to answer for his actions in front of everyone. Will they side with Adrian? Depends on how he plays it."
But it's leverage, proof that we're not the problem here. That might be enough to shift the political calculation. Aurora called Adrian immediately, explained what Michael had found. The exhaustion in his voice from the night before was gone, replaced by focused intensity. "Get that evidence to Vincent.
Have him call an emergency session of the Inter-Family Council. It's time to put Salvatore Corso on trial. The Inter-Family Council convened 3 days later in a fortified estate on Long Island, far enough from the city to discourage FBI surveillance, but close enough that every major player could attend on short notice. Aurora had never seen so much concentrated power in one place. Representatives from 15 families, their combined influence stretching from Boston to Philadelphia, controlling billions in both legitimate and illegal enterprise. She sat in an observation room with Michael, watching through one-way glass as Adrian entered the main hall. He dressed for battle in a perfectly tailored navy suit, his bearing confident despite the hostile eyes tracking his every movement. Salvatore Corso sat across the long conference table, Valentina at his side, both of them projecting the casual arrogance of people who believed they'd already won. The mediator was an elderly man named Giuseppe Marconi, semi-retired but still respected enough that both sides had agreed to his oversight. He called the session to order with a gavel that sounded like a gunshot in the tense silence. We're here to address allegations of unauthorized violence between the Valerio and Corso families, Giuseppe said, his voice surprisingly strong for someone in his 80s. Adrian Valerio has brought evidence of unprovoked attacks. Salvatore Corso disputes these claims. We will hear both sides and render judgment according to our laws and traditions. Adrian stood, and Michael started the video playback on screens positioned around the room. The footage was damning. Clear shots of Corso soldiers attacking the gambling house, weapons visible, faces identifiable. The timestamp proved it happened after the meeting at Ravello, after Salvatore's threats. 3 attacks in 2 weeks, Adrian said, his voice carrying to every corner of the room. 4 of my people dead, tens of thousands in property damage, all because I refused to give Salvatore Corso territory and influence he hadn't earned. This isn't business. It's extortion backed by violence. Salvatore stood slowly, his expression carefully controlled. What you're calling unprovoked attacks, I call legitimate responses to your destabilization of our entire system. You executed your own cousin, restructured operations without consulting neighboring families, and began dismantling profitable arrangements that had stood for decades. My actions were defensive, protecting my interests against an unstable leader. Defensive? Adrian's voice sharpened. You demanded the Brooklyn waterfront. Operations Dominic had no authority to promise you. When I refused, you started killing my people. That's not defense, that's aggression. Dominic had every authority. He was running New Jersey operations, while actively betraying my organization, working with your family to undermine my leadership, and orchestrating murders to hide his corruption. Adrian pulled out Antonio's journal, held it up. This is documented proof of Dominic's treason, proof I presented to my counsel before his execution. His arrangements with you were part of that treason, which makes them void. Giuseppe leaned forward, his ancient eyes sharp. Salvatore, did you know about Dominic Russo's plans to move against Adrian Valerio? The room went utterly silent. Salvatore's jaw tightened, and Aurora could see him calculating, trying to find an answer that didn't incriminate him. I had conversations with Dominic about potential partnerships, Salvatore said carefully. He expressed concerns about Adrian's leadership direction. That's not treason. That's normal political discourse within the organization. It's conspiracy, Adrian shot back. You knew Dominic was working against me, and you encouraged it. You saw an opportunity to weaken a rival family, and you took it, regardless of the consequences. You're one to talk about consequences. You started a civil war by executing family over disputed accusations. The accusations weren't disputed. Adrian's control finally cracked, anger bleeding through. Dominic confessed in front of the entire council. He admitted to manipulating the vote that got Marco Bianchi killed, admitted to understanding why Antonio Russo had to die. Those are his words, witnessed by every council member present. Giuseppe raised his hand for silence. I want to hear from the witnesses. Vincent Calabrese, you were present at both the original vote 3 years ago and Dominic Russo's confession. Tell us what you saw. Vincent stood, his expression grave. 3 years ago, Dominic pushed hard for Marco Bianchi's execution. He presented evidence of federal cooperation, argued that letting an informant live would destroy us all. It seemed legitimate at the time, so I voted with the majority. He paused, gathering himself. But after hearing Antonio's recordings, reading his journal, and listening to Dominic's own confession, I now believe we were manipulated. Dominic wanted that execution to happen for political reasons, not security ones. He used our fear against us. And his confession? Giuseppe prompted. He admitted everything. The manipulation, the meetings with the Corso family, even his involvement in Antonio's death. It wasn't coerced or ambiguous. He confessed freely when confronted with the evidence. Vincent's voice was steady, certain. Adrian had every right under our laws to bring that before the council, and we had every obligation to render judgment. Other council members confirmed Vincent's account, their testimonies building an undeniable picture of Dominic's betrayal and the legitimate process that led to his execution. Aurora watched Salvatore's position deteriorate with each witness, saw Valentina whispering urgently in her father's ear. Finally, Giuseppe turned back to Salvatore. It seems Adrian Valerio's actions, while dramatic, were legally sound according to our traditions. Your alliance with Dominic Russo was based on his unauthorized promises and his active betrayal of his own family. That makes your current territorial claims invalid. That's one interpretation, Salvatore said, but his voice had lost its earlier confidence. Another interpretation is that Adrian is consolidating power, eliminating rivals, and using legal technicalities to justify what amounts to a hostile takeover of Dominic's operations. Then let's address that directly. Giuseppe gestured to Adrian. You've made significant changes to your organization. Some families are concerned about what that means for established relationships and traditional operations. Explain your vision. Adrian stood again, and Aurora could feel the weight of this moment. Everything they'd fought for, all the death and sacrifice and impossible choices, came down to whether he could articulate a future these hardened criminals would accept. My vision is survival, Adrian said simply. We're operating in a world that's changing faster than we can adapt. Federal law enforcement has technology and resources that make our old methods increasingly dangerous. Legitimate business offers better returns with less risk. The next generation doesn't want to live like their parents did, constantly looking over their shoulders, waiting for betrayal or arrest. He walked around the table, making eye contact with different family heads. Antonio Russo understood this. He saw that we needed to evolve, to transition our operations toward legitimacy while maintaining the strength and structure that's kept us powerful for generations. That's what I'm trying to do. Not destroy what we've built, but transform it into something that can last. Pretty words, one of the family heads said. But transformation requires trust, and you've just proven you'll kill family when they oppose you. Well, I executed a traitor who murdered my mentor and manipulated this organization for personal gain, Adrian corrected. If that makes me dangerous, then yes. I'm dangerous to anyone who thinks betrayal should go unpunished. But I'm not interested in eliminating people who disagree with me. I'm interested in building consensus around a shared vision of survival. And those of us who don't share that vision, Salvatore challenged, then we part ways. Peacefully, if possible. I'm not trying to force anyone into my organization or my way of thinking, but I'm also not going to let you undermine what I'm building or kill my people because you disagree with my methods. Adrian's voice was hard. You want war, Salvatore? You want to test whether your old-school approach can beat my evolving one? We can do that. But I promise you, it won't end the way you think it will. The threat hung in the air, unmistakable despite the diplomatic language. Salvatore's face flushed with anger, but before he could respond, Valentina put a hand on his arm. Perhaps, she said smoothly, we can find a middle ground. My father's concerns are legitimate. Rapid change creates instability, and instability hurts everyone. But Adrian's points about evolution are also valid. Maybe instead of fighting over who's right, we discuss how to manage this transition in a way that protects everyone's interests. It was a strategic retreat dressed up as compromise, and everyone in the room recognized it, but it also offered Salvatore a way to back down without losing complete face, which made it politically valuable. Giuseppe seized on the opening. A reasonable suggestion. Adrian, would you be willing to establish a transition committee? Representatives from concerned families who can provide input on major changes ensure that evolution doesn't become revolution. Aurora could see Adrian weighing it, calculating whether oversight would constrain him too much or provide the political cover he needed to continue his reforms. I'd accept that, Adrian said carefully, with clear boundaries. The committee advises but doesn't have veto power over my family's internal operations. They review major changes that affect interfamily relationships, but they don't micromanage day-to-day decisions. And membership requires good faith participation. No using the committee as cover for continued aggression. Salvatore? Giuseppe turned to the Corso family head. Salvatore looked like he wanted to refuse, to push this confrontation to its violent conclusion. But he was surrounded by families who'd just watched his legal position collapse, who'd heard his alliance with Dominic characterized as conspiracy with a traitor. Continuing to fight now would isolate him politically and potentially expose him to the same judgment Dominic had faced. Fine, he said through gritted teeth, a transition committee. But I want regular updates, transparent accounting, and the ability to raise concerns without being accused of sabotage. Agreed, Adrian said. As long as raising concerns doesn't include murdering my people or attacking my operations. The violence stops, Giuseppe declared, bringing his gavel down with finality. Both families cease hostile actions immediately. Salvatore, you will provide compensation for the lives lost and property damaged in your unsanctioned attacks. Adrian, you will establish the transition committee within 2 weeks and provide the first briefing within a month. Any violations of this agreement will be treated as breaking council law, with appropriate consequences. It wasn't a complete victory for either side, but it was enough. The families began filing out, conversations starting immediately about what this meant for the larger power structure. Aurora watched Adrian accept congratulations from some council members while others maintained careful distance, still uncertain about his leadership. Salvatore and Valentina left without speaking to anyone, their exit stiff with barely controlled fury. Aurora knew this wasn't over. Salvatore would look for other ways to undermine Adrian, and Valentina would continue playing her long game. But the immediate crisis had passed, and Adrian had survived with his authority intact. Michael appeared at Aurora's elbow. We should get out of here before the parking lot becomes another battlefield. These things have a way of reigniting once everyone's had a few drinks and started nursing their grudges. They collected Adrian and made their exit, 3 vehicles of security forming up around them for the drive back to the city. Aurora rode with Adrian, watching the tension slowly drain from his shoulders as they put distance between themselves and the council estate. You did it, she said quietly. You held your ground and came out ahead. I bought time, Adrian corrected, and created a monitoring system that's either going to provide useful oversight or become a tool for my enemies to slow me down. We'll see which. You're not allowed to be pessimistic. You just won a major political victory. I'm being realistic. But Adrian smiled faintly, some of the weight lifting from his expression. Though I'll admit, it could have gone much worse. Salvatore could have called my bluff, pushed for open war. The fact that he backed down suggests he's not as confident in his support as he pretended. Or Valentina talked sense into him. She's smart enough to recognize a losing position, which makes her dangerous long-term. Salvatore will eventually retire or be removed, and Valentina will take over. When that happens, she'll remember all of this. How I exposed her alliance with Dominic, how I forced her father to back down publicly. That's the kind of grudge that lasts decades. Aurora studied his profile. This man who'd become so much more than the enemy she'd planned to destroy. Do you ever get tired of thinking 3 moves ahead, of calculating every interaction like a chess game? Constantly. But it's the only way to survive in this world. Adrian turned to look at her. Speaking of survival, we should probably talk about your future. The immediate crisis is over. Salvatore's been dealt with, Dominic's legacy is dismantled, and the organization is moving forward. You could walk away now. Go back to your normal life. Put all this behind you. Is that what you want? I want you to be safe and happy, whichever path provides that. Adrian's voice was careful, controlled. But selfishly, I want you to stay. I've gotten used to having someone I can trust completely, someone who sees through the political games to the actual human underneath. Losing that would make this job even lonelier than it already is. Aurora felt her heart twist. Over the past months, something had shifted between them. The alliance forged in shared grief and common purpose had deepened into something more complicated. She'd seen Adrian at his worst and his best, watched him make impossible choices and carry unbearable weight. And somewhere along the way, the man she'd once blamed for her brother's death had become someone she couldn't imagine her life without. I don't want to go back to my normal life, she admitted. That person who planned revenge for 3 years, who thought destroying you would somehow make the grief easier, she doesn't exist anymore. I've changed too much to pretend otherwise. Then stay. Work with me. Help me build what Antonio envisioned. Adrian reached for her hand, his fingers warm and solid. Not as an employee or an obligation, but as a genuine partner, someone with equal voice and equal stake in what we're creating. Partners, Aurora repeated, testing the word. In business or in life? Why not both? Adrian's smile was tentative, hopeful. We've survived war together. We faced down enemies and exposed corruption and made it through when everyone predicted we'd fail. If we can do all that, maybe we can figure out how to build something personal alongside the professional. Aurora thought about Marco, about the brother whose death had brought her into Adrian's orbit. She thought about Antonio, whose vision for evolution continued to guide them both. And she thought about the future, not the one she'd imagined in her grief-fueled rage, but the one unfolding in front of her, complicated and challenging and real. Okay, she said. Partners, both kinds. Adrian pulled her closer, and Aurora went willingly, finally allowing herself to acknowledge what had been building between them for months. The kiss was gentle at first, tentative, two people who'd been through too much to rush into anything without being certain. But it deepened naturally, 3 years of grief and rage and survival transforming into something hopeful and new. When they finally pulled apart, Aurora was smiling despite the tears on her cheeks. Marco would probably hate this, his sister falling for a Mafia boss. Antonio would approve. He always said the best partnerships were built on mutual respect and shared purpose. Adrian wiped away her tears with his thumb. And maybe they're both watching, hoping we can succeed where they couldn't. Build something better. Break the cycle. The car pulled up to Adrian's headquarters, and reality reasserted itself. There would be meetings to attend, security briefings to review, the endless work of running an organization in transition. But for the first time in 3 years, Aurora felt something besides grief and rage driving her forward. She felt hope. Over the following months, the transition committee proved to be exactly the mixed blessing Adrian had predicted. Some members engaged in good faith, offering genuine insights that improved the organization's evolution toward legitimacy. Others, including Salvatore's representative, used every meeting as an opportunity to raise objections and slow progress. But the oversight provided political cover, made other families more comfortable with the changes, and gradually built momentum toward the future Antonio had envisioned. Aurora found her role expanding beyond just being Adrian's partner. Her outsider perspective, her understanding of how normal people viewed the criminal world, became invaluable in restructuring operations. She helped design programs to transition people out of illegal activities into legitimate work, created community investment initiatives that built goodwill, and served as a bridge between Adrian's vision and the practical reality of implementation. Vincent Calabrese became an unexpected ally, his guilt over Marco's death transforming into genuine commitment to reform. He worked with Aurora to establish a foundation in Marco's name, providing scholarships and job training for young people in neighborhoods where the organization operated. It wasn't redemption exactly, but it was acknowledgement that past wrongs required ongoing efforts to make amends. The breakthrough came 11 months after the council session, when 3 more families formally joined Adrian's Coalition for Evolution. The tipping point had been reached. Enough leadership now supported transition toward legitimacy that it became the dominant model rather than a radical experiment. Salvatore Corso found himself increasingly isolated, his old-school methods looking antiquated rather than traditional. Valentina reached out to Aurora on a gray afternoon in November, requesting a private meeting. They met at the same coffee shop where they'd confronted each other months earlier, the echo of that conversation hanging between them. "I'm not here to apologize," Valentina said without preamble. "What we did, helping Dominic, using you, it was strategic. Ruthless, but strategic. That's the world we live in." "Lived in," Aurora corrected. "The world's changing, whether you accept it or not." "Maybe. Or maybe this is just a temporary phase and eventually the old ways reassert themselves." Valentina sipped her espresso, her expression unreadable. "But I'm pragmatic enough to recognize when I've lost a particular battle. My father is stepping back. Health issues officially, but we both know it's because he can't adapt to what Adrian's building. I'll be taking over the Corso family operations within 6 months. And you're telling me this because? Because I want you to know that when I take over, things will be different. I don't share my father's grudges or his resistance to change. I'm willing to work with Adrian's vision if it benefits my family. Valentina met Aurora's gaze directly. I'm also willing to acknowledge that using your grief the way I did was effective but not honorable. You deserved better. It wasn't quite an apology, but it was closer than Aurora had expected. What do you want, Valentina? A fresh start. Corso and Valerio families working together instead of against each other. My expertise in negotiation and political maneuvering combined with Adrian's vision and your moral compass. Valentina smiled slightly. We could build something remarkable if we stopped trying to destroy each other. Aurora considered the offer, recognizing both the genuine opportunity and the potential trap. Valentina was brilliant and ambitious, someone who could be either a powerful ally or a dangerous enemy. But she was also someone who understood the game Adrian was playing and had the skills to help him succeed. I'll discuss it with Adrian, Aurora said carefully. But I can tell you right now, any partnership requires complete transparency. No more secret alliances, no more manipulation. If we work together, it has to be based on genuine trust. Trust is earned through actions, not promises. Valentina stood, gathering her coat. Give me a chance to earn it, that's all I'm asking. When Aurora relayed the conversation to Adrian that evening, he listened thoughtfully, his fingers steepled under his chin. Valentina Corso offering alliance. 6 months ago, I would have said it was impossible. Now? He shook his head. The world really is changing. Do we trust her? No, but we can work with her anyway, keeping our eyes open and our defenses strong. If she's genuine about cooperation, it could accelerate everything we're trying to accomplish. If she's not, we'll be ready. Adrian pulled Aurora into his arms, resting his chin on top of her head. Either way, we face it together. The wedding happened on a spring afternoon 14 months after Aurora had confronted Adrian at the charity gala. They kept it small, close friends, trusted allies, the people who'd stood with them through everything. Vincent Calabrese gave Aurora away, a gesture that felt right given his role in Marco's story and his commitment to honoring that memory. Michael served as Adrian's best man, his gruff demeanor softening as he witnessed the union of two people who'd found each other in the wreckage of tragedy. The ceremony itself was simple, secular, focused on the commitment they were making to build a future together. When Adrian slipped the ring onto Aurora's finger, she thought about the journey that had brought them here, from enemies to allies to partners, to something deeper than she had words to express. I never imagined this, she whispered during their first dance. Never thought the man I blamed for Marco's death would become the person I trusted most in the world. I never imagined finding someone who could see past the armor I wear, who could know everything about this life, and choose it anyway. Adrian held her closer. Antonio used to say that the best things in life come from the places we least expect. I think he'd be happy about us. Marco, too, eventually. He always wanted me to find someone who challenged me, who made me better. Aurora smiled against Adrian's shoulder. He'd probably give you hell about the whole Mafia thing, but he'd also recognize that you're trying to make it into something better than it was. The reception continued into the evening, speeches and toasts celebrating not just the marriage, but everything it represented: transformation, redemption, the possibility of building light from darkness. When Valentina Corso raised her glass to wish them happiness, Aurora saw genuine warmth in her expression, suggesting that maybe, just maybe, old enemies could become new allies. 3 years after that spring wedding, Aurora stood in the renovated community center that bore Marco's name, watching teenagers participate in job training programs that would give them alternatives to the criminal life that had claimed her brother. The Marco Bianchi Foundation had grown beyond anything she'd initially imagined, serving thousands of young people across the tri-state area with education, mentorship, and opportunities. Adrian joined her, slipping an arm around her waist as they watched the students work. He'd be proud of this, of what you've built in his name. What we've built, Aurora corrected. None of this would exist without your support, your resources, your commitment to actually changing the system instead of just exploiting it. The organization had transformed dramatically in those 3 years. Nearly 70% of operations were now legitimate: real estate, import-export, investment portfolios that generated substantial returns without legal risk. The remaining illegal activities were being phased out gradually, with people given options to transition into legitimate work or leave with generous severance packages. It wasn't perfect, and there were still elements that made Aurora uncomfortable, but the trajectory was undeniably positive. Valentina had proven to be a genuine ally, her political skills and network connections invaluable in building coalitions and managing relationships with other families. The three of them, Adrian, Aurora, and Valentina, had formed an effective leadership team, their different strengths complementing each other. Trust had grown slowly but steadily, built through consistent actions and shared victories. The transition committee had evolved into a genuine governing body, providing oversight and accountability that prevented any single family from dominating. Salvatore Corso had passed away the previous year, his death marking the end of an era. At his funeral, Aurora had felt an unexpected sadness, not for the man himself, but for the world he'd represented, the old ways that were slowly dying. "I have news," Adrian said, pulling her from her thoughts. "The FBI reached out through back channels. They want to meet, discuss a formal cooperation agreement." Aurora's heart skipped. "You mean full legitimacy?" "They stop investigating us. We provide information on remaining criminal networks that we're not affiliated with. It's not immunity exactly, but it's close. A recognition that we're transitioning out of illegal activities, and they'd rather support that than fight it." Adrian's voice was careful, measured. "It's what Antonio dreamed of, full integration into legitimate society." "And you're considering it?" "I'm terrified of it. Once we make that deal, there's no going back. We become cooperators, informants, the thing Dominic accused us of being. Some of the old guard will see it as the ultimate betrayal." Adrian turned to face her fully. "But I'm also excited about it. About finally being able to operate without constantly looking over our shoulder, without wondering if today's the day federal agents kick down our doors." Aurora thought about Marco, who'd tried to cooperate with the FBI and paid with his life. She thought about how different the world had become in the 6 years since his death, how the impossible had gradually become merely difficult and then finally achievable. "Do it," she said. "Take the meeting. Hear what they're offering. If it's genuine, if it provides a path forward, take it. Honor everyone we've lost by actually finishing what they started." Adrian kissed her, soft and grateful. "Have I told you recently that marrying you was the smartest decision I've ever made?" "Not in at least 3 hours. I was starting to feel neglected." They stayed at the community center until evening, Aurora working with students while Adrian reviewed security protocols with Michael. The casual domesticity of it struck her sometimes, how a life built on criminal enterprise had transformed into something almost normal, almost peaceful. That night, in the home they'd built together in a quiet neighborhood far from the chaos of the city, Aurora found herself thinking about endings and beginnings. Marco's story had ended tragically, but it had led to changes that might save countless others from similar fates. Antonio's vision had seemed impossible, but it was being realized slowly, stubbornly, through the combined efforts of people who refused to accept that the old ways were the only ways. Adrian emerged from his study, looking exhausted but satisfied. "Just confirmed the FBI meeting for next week. Vincent and 2 other council members will be there to show this isn't just me going rogue." "Are you scared?" "Terrified, but also hopeful, which is worse somehow. Fear I know how to handle. Hope feels dangerous." Adrian collapsed onto the couch beside her. "What if this works, Aurora? What if we actually pull this off, create something legitimate and sustainable? What do we do then?" "We live," Aurora said simply. "We build the normal life we never thought we could have. We have kids, maybe, if you want them. We grow old together without constantly wondering if today's the day everything collapses." She took his hand, laced their fingers together. "We honor everyone we've lost by actually being happy." The idea seemed to settle something in Adrian's expression. "I like that. Being happy as an act of defiance against everything that tried to destroy us." Marco would approve. He always said the best revenge was living well. Aurora smiled, thinking of her brother. "And I think Antonio would be proud that we're finishing what he started." 6 months later, the cooperation agreement with the FBI was finalized. The transition to complete legitimacy would take another 5 years, but the path was clear, the destination certain. Other families followed Adrian's lead, recognizing that the world had changed and they could either evolve or be destroyed by their refusal to adapt. There were setbacks, certainly. Some old guard members refused the transition and had to be removed from the organization. A few rival families tried to exploit the perceived weakness of cooperation with law enforcement, requiring defensive actions that reminded everyone that legitimacy didn't mean weakness. But the trajectory held, the vision gradually becoming reality. On the 7th anniversary of Marco's death, Aurora visited his grave with flowers and news of how his foundation had expanded to serve 10,000 students annually. She told him about her marriage to Adrian, about the unlikely alliance that had formed from tragedy, about the world they were building in his memory. "I hope you're proud," she said quietly, laying the flowers on his headstone. "I hope you understand why I fell in love with him despite everything. He's not perfect, but he's trying to be better. We both are." Adrian appeared beside her, his own flowers in hand. They stood together in silence, honoring the brother and the mentor whose deaths had somehow led to transformation rather than just revenge. "Do you ever regret it?" Adrian asked eventually. "That night at the gala, confronting me, starting all of this?" "Every day," Aurora admitted. "And also, never. If I'd known where it would lead, I might have chosen differently. But I also can't imagine my life without you in it now. Can't imagine not being part of what we're building." She turned to face him. "Regret and gratitude can exist together. I've learned to hold both." They left the cemetery hand in hand, driving back to the city and the life they'd created together. That evening, they hosted a dinner for the extended family, Vincent and Michael, Valentina and several of her key lieutenants, younger generation members who'd grown up during the transition and couldn't imagine operating any other way. The conversation flowed easily, laughter punctuating serious discussions about business and strategy. Aurora watched Adrian at the head of the table, confident and relaxed in a way that would have been impossible 6 years ago. She saw the future in the faces of the younger members, people who'd learned that success didn't require brutality, that power could be built on trust instead of fear. After everyone left, Aurora and Adrian stood on their balcony overlooking the Manhattan skyline, the city lights glittering like promises below them. "We did it," Adrian said softly. "We actually built something good from all that death and grief. We're still building it. The work's not done." "No, but the foundation is solid. The vision is clear. And we have time now, years to finish what Antonio started, to prove that evolution is possible." Adrian pulled her closer. "Thank you for staying, for choosing this life when you could have walked away." Aurora thought about the woman she'd been, consumed by revenge and grief, certain that destroying Adrian Valerio would somehow ease the pain of Marco's loss. That woman seemed like a stranger now, someone who'd understood so little about the complexity of the world and the possibility of redemption. "I didn't choose this life," she said. "I chose you. The life just came along as part of the package." "Is that a complaint?" "It's an observation. And maybe a confession that I wouldn't change anything, even knowing how hard it's been, even understanding that the struggle continues." Aurora turned in his arms, looking up at the man who'd been her enemy, her ally, her partner, her husband. "We're building something that matters, Adrian. Something that honors everyone we've lost by making sure their deaths meant something beyond just more death." Marco and Antonio would approve. I think they're both watching and cheering us on, probably arguing about methodology, Antonio with his strategic vision and Marco with his stubborn idealism, but both hoping we succeed. Aurora smiled. "We're their legacy now, the living proof that transformation is possible, that grief doesn't have to become rage, that love can grow even in the darkest places." Adrian kissed her, soft and lingering, a promise and a celebration wrapped together. When they finally pulled apart, Aurora felt the truth of what they'd built settle around her like a warm blanket. The journey had been brutal, the cost impossibly high, but they'd survived, more than survived. They'd transformed pain into purpose, loss into legacy, revenge into redemption. The city sparkled below them, millions of lives unfolding in the darkness, most of them never knowing about the quiet revolution happening in the shadows. The Valerio family was becoming something new, something better. and Aurora was proud to be part of that transformation. "Come on," she said, taking Adrian's hand. "Let's go inside. Tomorrow we can change the world. Tonight, let's just be happy." They went inside together, closing the door on the past and opening themselves to the future they were building, one choice, one day, one act of stubborn hope at a time. The war was over. The work continued. But for the first time in 6 years, Aurora felt something she'd almost forgotten was possible. She felt peace. And in that peace, wrapped in Adrian's arms in the home they'd made together, Aurora understood that this was the victory that mattered most. Not revenge or justice or even transformation, though those had all played their parts. The real victory was choosing love over hate, building over destroying, hope over despair. Marco would have approved. Antonio would have been proud. And Aurora, the woman who'd spent 3 years planning revenge only to find redemption instead, finally allowed herself to believe that the future they were building was worth every sacrifice, every choice, every impossible moment that had brought them here. The greatest revenge, it turned out, was never revenge at all. It was choosing to live fully, love deeply, and build something beautiful from the wreckage of what had been destroyed. That was justice. That was honor. That was the legacy worth leaving behind.